Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started, guys, with meditation. But today, since we're further into our class and you guys have been getting guidance throughout the meditation, I'm not going to give you any guidance today. I'm just going to do the chanting and then you guys do your own meditation. So this way it'll help to transition from the class over to practicing yourself, because as you go out into the world, you're going to need to be able to meditate on your own without any guidance. So if you guys remember, you're focused on the breath, and anytime the mind moves off the breath, you're cutting that off, letting it go, and bringing the mind back to the breath. Okay, so if you'd like to join along in the chanting, you're more than welcome to. And then afterwards, it'll just be quiet. You'll just be on your own for meditation. Then we'll come out of the meditation with some more chanting. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanang Abhivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anuttaro Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusarang Bhutto Bhagavati. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakeva Potang Mahakavanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatava Manusranang Oto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Good morning to all of you guys. Welcome back. Nice to see all of you guys this morning. As I mentioned at the beginning of our course, I was going to gradually help build you guys up to a 30-minute meditation, because that's what ultimately you would like to be doing each session is 30 minutes or more. And this is what's going to really help to transform the mind if you're meditating 2 or 3 times a day for 30 minutes or more each session. So this was our first session where it was 100, exactly 30 minutes essentially. I've been gradually building you guys up throughout the course. So if this felt like it was, maybe just, it's kind of simple, kind of straightforward, you're like, yeah, no problem. Okay, you can see you're at a 30-minute meditation. If you felt like it was a little bit of a stretch for you to get to that 30 minutes, then you can see there's some room to grow. Or if it seemed like it was just right, okay, there you go. You've got your 30-minute meditation. So you guys can continue to build up to this and maintain this throughout your practice. And this is what's going to help to transform the mind. Remember, with meditation, it's more about the frequency of the meditation more than the duration. So as you're building up your practice, if you have the option of 1 meditation for 30 minutes or 2 for 15, the 2 for 15 is going to be more beneficial than the 1 for 30 minutes, because it's that frequency that really makes a big difference. So you guys can work with your meditation and continue to grow, continue to develop, and you'll see the transformation to your mind as you're implementing meditation each day in your day-to-day life. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to share this topic of what is Kamma and how does it affect me. I'm going to share this with you guys, and we're going to take our mid-morning break. Then we're going to come back and I'm going to teach you what is merit and continued support on the path to enlightenment. Then we're going to have our lunch break. And then we come back this afternoon. We'll talk about the field trip tomorrow. We'll talk about some other things, and we have an activity this afternoon. So this topic of what is Kamma and how does it affect me, this is where you're going to see a lot of things coming together from this course, because I've really been teaching you about this all the way through. The teachings of the Buddha in one way or another come back to this natural law of Kamma in one way or another. When we talk about awakening the mind and we talk about awakening to the cultivating wisdom about the natural laws, this is the main natural law that you're cultivating wisdom about. This is what the mind doesn't understand in its unenlightened state. It doesn't understand this cause and effect or this action and result. This word Kamma, if it translated just one word, I would use that. Some people are more familiar with the word karma. This is from the Sanskrit language, but the original teachings of the Buddha are in the Pali language, so people who study that will typically use this word Kamma. It's nothing mystical or magical. It's actually a natural law that is affecting everyone, whether they're aware of it or not. There's nothing mystical or magical. What it means is cause and effect, or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. Whenever you make a decision, either wisely or unwisely, it's going to produce either wholesome Kamma or unwholesome Kamma. Or we can think of that as wholesome results or unwholesome results. Sometimes when we're in life, without a lack of wisdom or with a lack of wisdom of this natural law, we'll think that what we're experiencing in day-to-day life is either good luck or bad luck, or destiny or fate. Or some people think that it's God that's controlling what we experience. Or some people think there's a universe that's, choosing things for us, or that there's other people that are causing us to experience what we experience. But what you can come to understand is that everything you're experiencing is a result of your decisions. There's no situation where there isn't a result of your decision, that is something is occurring. But one of the ways you can think about the natural law of Kamma is a sequence of events, that there's certain decisions that are made that lead to a particular result. And the more that you awaken to the wisdom of this natural law, the more you'll be able to go out into the world, make wise decisions, and experience wholesome results. If there's anything in your life that you don't particularly care for that's happening, all you need to do is cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. But if it's good luck or bad luck, or if it's destiny or fate, or if it's God that's controlling things, or if it's other people, or if it's some universe that's deciding what you experience, you have no ability to change anything in your life. You're just a robot, right? And if you resign yourself to that level of thinking, then it's very defeating. It's very problematic for you, because you can't do anything to fix anything that's going on in your life. And that's not true reality of what's actually happening. So you need to be able to see true reality very clearly of what's actually happening. And before we even get into this topic, one of the ways you can see this is ask yourself, who chose to sit where you're at right now? Did somebody force you to do this? Did somebody control you to sit where you're sitting? Or was this your choice? What about your hairstyle? Who chose that? Who chose the clothes that you're wearing right now? Who chose where you live? Who chose your friends? Who chose your occupation or your job, or whether you even work or not? All of these choices are being made by you. And the more that you understand this natural law, you'll be able to get to a point where you're experiencing nothing but wholesome results. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're only experiencing wholesome results in the world. You're not experiencing unwholesome Kamma. So that's why it's important to study this and understand it in detail. So this natural law affects every being, whether they're aware of it or not. It's functioning at all times, every moment, and whether you're aware of this natural law or not, it's going to affect you. There's no being or entity that's overseeing this natural law of Kamma. This is a result of your own intentions, your speech, and your actions. As you're making decisions about your intentions, speech, and actions, it's going to produce a certain result in the world. It's important not to think about the natural law of Kamma as a system of punishments and rewards, because depending on what you've learned in the past, depending on where you've been and what you've been exposed to, sometimes people think of it that way. But that's because of what you've been learning, maybe in another tradition or some other exposure that you've had. But the natural law of Kamma is not punishments and rewards. It's the results of your decisions. It's a sequence of events that are leading to any particular result. And the more wisdom that you have of this natural law, the more you can make wise decisions where you'll experience wholesome results. The natural law of Kamma isn't even about who's at fault or who's to blame. That's not what the natural law of Kamma is, but sometimes people want to think about it that way. But I encourage you not to think of it that way. Instead, this sequence of events, or this cause and effect, or action and result. And as I mentioned, the natural law of Kamma is not anything mystical or magical. Some people think it's like a dark cloud that's following you around. Or I've heard some people talk about it like a bank account that you're making deposits into. And then if you make enough deposits, you can make withdrawals too. You can do unwholesome and unwise things because you have such a high bank account balance of your Kamma. This isn't true. This isn't the way it works. So I'm going to help you guys to understand this and demystify this natural law of Kamma, because this is what you're awakening to. So just as a summary, the natural law of Kamma is cause and effect, or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. It's your life, it's your decisions, and it's your results. Nobody else is creating these results for you. It's the decisions that you make that lead to any particular result. Some words from the Buddha on the natural law of Kamma to illustrate two important points now that you're starting to approach this and understand it. These are just two important points that I'm going to share with you at this point. But over here in this book series, out of the 13 books, one of the books is dedicated to the natural law of Kamma. It's a consolidated collection of the teachings of the Buddha on the natural law of Kamma. But you could really say the entire book series is about the natural law of Kamma. It's not just one book. So these two particular things, these are just to illustrate two specific points that I need you to be able to understand as we enter into understanding the natural law of Kamma. Here he says, beings are the owners of their Kamma, the heirs of their Kamma. They have Kamma as their origin, Kamma as their relative, Kamma as their resort. Whatever Kamma they do, wholesome or unwholesome, they are its heirs. What he's saying here is you're the only one that can create Kamma for you. It's not like you can rub off your good Kamma or your unwholesome Kamma or your wholesome Kamma to someone else. And it's not like someone else can rub off their unwholesome Kamma or their wholesome Kamma on you, because sometimes people say things like that, like, oh, don't bring your unwholesome Kamma around here, right? Don't rub that off on me. It's not possible for that to occur. It's your decisions that are leading to any particular result. Then the Buddha says, the result of Kamma, I say, is threefold, to be experienced in this very life, or in the next rebirth, or on some subsequent occasion. The some subsequent occasion is some life after the next one. Now, this cycle of rebirth, it can be independently verified. You may not have the wisdom of how to do that right now, but you can gain that wisdom if you like. In volume 11, chapter 105, this is where I share the detailed description of how to independently verify the cycle of rebirth. I give you 17 different criteria of how to independently verify this. So the Buddha is helping you to be able to see that whatever decisions you make, either wise or unwise, you're going to experience those results, either in this life, the next life, or some future life. So what he's saying is you can't run and hide from the Kamma that you create. Whenever you make a decision, you will experience the results of that. It's not possible for you to run and hide from that. So if you come to understand that you're the one that's creating your Kamma, and you can't run and hide from it, the wise individual would say, well, let me understand as much about this natural law as I can, because I'm not interested in experiencing unwholesome results. It's kind of like if you were walking down the beach and you were kicking up sand and it kept blowing back in your face. You're like, whoa, I need to stop doing that because I don't like that sand coming back in my face. Well, it's the same thing as if you're going through life and you're experiencing unwholesome results coming back to you. There's some sand that you're kicking up, and you just got to understand what that is, gain the wisdom of it, and then make different decisions, and you won't experience those unwholesome results coming back to you. So what I'm going to help you start with is understand 4 types of Kamma that you need to understand. And then we're going to talk about how to extinguish your unwholesome Kamma so that you can get to the point where you're only experiencing wholesome Kamma. The 4 types of Kamma that we're going to talk about are wholesome Kamma and unwholesome Kamma, old Kamma and new Kamma. And I'm going to be giving you some examples so you can understand this. What wholesome Kamma is anytime you're making decisions that are harmless. When you're making harmless decisions and you're not causing harm in the world, then there's going to be wholesome results. When you're making harmful decisions, when you're causing harm, then there's going to be unwholesome results that come back to you. So this is wholesome and unwholesome kamma. So we might say when you're making wise decisions to not cause harm, you will experience wholesome results or wholesome kamma. When you're making unwise decisions where you're being harmful, then you're going to experience unwholesome kamma or unwholesome results. Then there's old kamma and there's new kamma. What old kamma is any decisions you made in the past that you're experiencing the results of now, in the present moment. But then now, in the present moment, you're making decisions that you're going to experience the results of in the future. That's new kamma. So let me give you an example of this. Let's just say 3 years ago, I filled out a government tax form in order to report my income to the government, and then I'm going to pay taxes on that. But I lied on this tax form 3 years ago. And now they found the lie. And I get this letter in the mail 3 years later that says, you owe us $3,000. $1,000 for the original amount, $1,000 interest, and $1,000 penalty. This is old kamma because I made a decision 3 years ago to lie, and now I'm experiencing this old unwholesome kamma coming back to me. But now in the present moment, I have some choices to make. And if I didn't know these teachings, what I might do is I might rip up this letter and throw it away, think that I can run and hide from it. Or I might call up the government or write them a nasty letter and be bitter and harsh and hostile and try to, scare them or fear them into not charging me this money. Right? Being bitter and harsh and hostile through my intention, speech, and actions. But now if I did that in the present moment, I am creating new unwholesome kamma. Because now that this old unwholesome kamma is coming back to me with a lack of wisdom of these teachings, I'm making new decisions, and these new decisions are leading to unwholesome kamma. New unwholesome kamma. But if I understand these teachings and I understand that my goal is to extinguish all my unwholesome kamma, then when this old unwholesome kamma is coming back to me, I need to figure out a way to extinguish it. So I know the last thing I'm interested in doing is ripping up this letter and throwing it away, or contacting the government and being bitter and harsh and hostile towards them, because that would just create unwholesome kamma. So instead, what I might choose to do, because I realize I'm about to create some new kamma, I might call up the government, or I might write them a letter, be polite, kind, friendly, respectful, and say, hey, I'm so sorry. I take full responsibility for this error that happened on my tax form, and I would like to pay you back and make sure you have the money that you need, but I don't have $3,000. I'm so sorry. And maybe you're being so polite, so kind, and so friendly with this government worker that they decide, you know what? You don't have to pay us the interest or the penalty. Just pay us the original amount and we're fine. And then you might say, well, I'm so sorry. I would like to pay you that $1,000, but I don't even have that. I'm so sorry. And now maybe they work out a payment plan for you that over the coming months, maybe they will kind of break it up into monthly payments. And now you can extinguish this old unwholesome kamma. So in the present moment, I am creating new wholesome kamma through my decisions to practice in a polite, kind, friendly, respectful way, using the Eightfold Path as my guide, practicing right view, taking responsibility for the things that I'm experiencing, practicing right intention, practicing right speech, and all these other teachings that the Buddha shares with you. In the present moment, I'm creating new wholesome kamma. Okay, so this is wholesome kamma and unwholesome kamma, and then we've got old kamma and we've got new kamma. You guys have any questions on this? Yes, sir. If you could get a microphone, we're live streaming today. For those of you guys that are online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like.
I just have one quick question. I may have missed this in the first couple of days. Could you define wholesome in this context?
Yeah, wholesome would be anything that you're experiencing that is beneficial, that is not causing harm to you. So wholesome would be things that are beneficial and resulting from your wise decisions.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me see if we have any other questions. Let's see, I don't see any other questions. Okay, so now let's move into how you create unwholesome kamma. Oh, you have a question, Adrian? Sorry.
I just wanted to know what volume you were talking about of the book.
I'm sorry, the mic went out. If you could hold, no, it was working.
The book
mm-hmm.
that you were mentioning that's
Oh,
based
yes.
on Kamma? What volume is that?
Yeah, so volume 6 is
Okay.
all about the natural
All
law
right.
of Kamma. But we could really say that the entire book series is the natural law of Kamma, because everything the Buddha taught in one way or another, he's teaching you this cause and effect or action and result. But volume 6 has a consolidated version of teachings related to the natural law of Kamma. But even the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, all of those things are the natural law of Kamma.
All right, great. Thank you.
Yep. Everybody's getting a mic. Seems like you broke the ice.
Test. So where does randomness comes into play here?
There's no such thing as randomness.
Natural disasters. If I can be as wholesome as I want, and then I don't know, a brick falls on me because some building broke. There can be a flood. There can be an earthquake. There can be a tornado.
There's no such thing as randomness. There are certain decisions that you made. You chose to live in that area. And now when you made a choice to live in that area, there's now a hurricane that's coming, right? So there's no randomness. Things just don't randomly happen in the world. There's always going to be a decision that leads to any particular result. You need to be able to peer into it, and you need to be able to look at it closely, because you're not going to be able to see it right away, because your mind's thinking that there's things like randomness, or like I was mentioning before, sometimes people think about good luck or bad luck or destiny or fate. These are all things that one's mind's been conditioned to believe. But look at your life and think about anything that's in your life that's happened that it wasn't a result of your decisions, certain decisions that you made. Every single thing that you've experienced in life is decisions that you made. And the more you can see that and penetrate into that, the more empowering you're going to experience, because now if there's anything you don't particularly care for, you cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you'll experience different results.
Yeah, but you're not alone in the world. You can drive, for example, as safely as possible, and yet get hit by another unwholesome driver, let's call it. So
Yeah.
your decision might be, I drove. Your decision might be, I lived in a city where there are cars. But if you keep peeling that down, then you're left with, you cannot do anything, because anything you do comes into contact with things that other beings or weather or anything occurs.
Yeah, so remember, the natural law of Kamma is a sequence of events. It's the results of your decisions. So even if I get into a car and I drive down the street and I'm sitting at a red light and somebody comes from behind me and they hit me in the back of the car, this is Kamma. This is the results of decisions that I made. I didn't choose for someone to hit me in the back of the car, but there was a sequence of events that led to me sitting at that traffic light. And there was a sequence of events on this person's side. Maybe they didn't maintain their car. Maybe they're looking at their mobile phone. Maybe they're distracted by music or children in the car, whatever it is. And now they've slammed into the back of my car. So now this has occurred. This is a sequence of events that has occurred. There's 5 things, no matter how enlightened you are, that you will still experience. You're still going to experience aging, sickness, death, destruction, and loss. You can't avoid those things, because those are the universal truth of impermanence those things are being caused by. There's aging, which is caused by impermanence. There's sickness, which is impermanence. There's death, which is impermanence. There's destruction, which comes from impermanence. Your material objects are going to be destroyed. And there's going to be loss. You're going to lose certain things. Now, these things can also happen as a result of our unwise decisions. We could choose to, walk out in the middle of the street and get hit by a car. And now, because of our unwise decision, it led to this unwholesome result of being killed. But even someone who's enlightened, they're still going to experience these 5 things. So you're going to still experience a car accident, for example. I was in a motorbike accident a few weeks ago. This isn't from my unwholesome Kamma, but this is a result of decisions. There was a sequence of decisions. I chose to ride a motorbike. I chose to come around that turn. There happened to be the water that was on the ground And that was probably from one of the ice trucks that go around early in the morning and they dripping water out on the street. And now when I came around with that centrifugal force and I was on a motorbike that I wasn't familiar with, I'd only had it for 5 days, has a higher center of gravity, it went out from under me and well, wham, I experienced this accident. Right? So I experienced sickness of the body or illness of the body. I experienced destruction in terms of the body, and the motorbike had a little bit of damage to it. And there was some loss, right? There was a certain loss of things that happened as a result. No matter how enlightened you are, you're still going to experience these things. So it's important that you don't think of it as you deserved this, or this is, getting to the point where you have nothing but wholesome Kamma doesn't mean everything in the world is going to happen your way. This is the way people sometimes think of it when I explain that by the time you get to enlightenment, that you'll have nothing but wholesome Kamma. That doesn't mean that you're never going to experience sickness, for example, or you're never going to experience a motorbike accident. Those things can happen from unwise decisions, but not always. They can just be happening from a sequence of decisions that are occurring, and those sequence of decisions have led to this particular result.
Even if those decisions were wholesome decisions?
If you're having wholesome decisions and wise decisions, they're going to lead to wholesome results. But when you make unwise decisions, it's going to lead to unwholesome results. So one of the things that the students asked me when I first got into a motorbike accident, and they said, isn't this unwholesome Kamma that you're experiencing this injury from the motorbike accident? And I explained to them, no, it's not unwholesome Kamma. I haven't experienced unwholesome Kamma for years and years and years and years. It is an unfortunate situation, but no matter how enlightened you are, you're still going to experience sickness. You're still going to experience loss and destruction. And that's what I experienced in that situation.
Well, isn't that the randomness? Because
No.
if you even if you are completely enlightened and you make only wholesome decisions, and those decisions might still lead to unfortunate results, then somewhere along that logical path, there's a gap.
That's just in your own mind. There's a gap because you haven't seen the natural law of Kamma 100%. So there's no randomness. There's a sequence of events that have led to it. So for example, had I chosen to purchase a car in the past, then I wouldn't have experienced a motorbike accident.
But you might have been in a car accident.
Right. But so one of the ways to eliminate a motorbike accident is to never ride a motorbike. One of the ways to eliminate a car accident is never to ride in a car. But you can now walk down the street, you can ride a bicycle,
Exactly.
and these things are still going to happen. That's not a random thing that's happening. That's happening because of the universal truth of impermanence. If the person's enlightened, right, they've already extinguished their unwholesome Kamma, so now they're going to be experiencing only wholesome Kamma. But experiencing only wholesome Kamma doesn't mean that you never experience sickness. It doesn't mean that you never experience destruction or loss. You're still going to experience those things because of impermanence, but there's still a sequence of events that are leading to that. It's not a random thing. It's a sequence of events that are leading to it. So getting to the point where you experience exclusively wholesome Kamma doesn't mean nothing is ever going to happen to you. It means that you're experiencing wise decision making, and from your decisions, you're only experiencing wholesome Kamma. But you're still going to experience sickness, aging, death, loss, and destruction. It's going to happen because of impermanence. And that is a sequence of events. But it's not wholesome or unwholesome if the person is already enlightened.
And if they're not?
If they're not enlightened, it can be from their unwise decisions. Their cause and effect, unwise decisions can lead to unwholesome results. So the same situation that is occurring could be unwholesome Kamma, but it may not be. So for example, let's just take the same example of a motorbike accident. So I had a motorbike accident, and I shared with people, this isn't unwholesome Kamma because I know I haven't experienced unwholesome Kamma for so long. A different individual could be driving down the street, driving erratically, driving really fast, cutting people off, not using their turn signal. That person can get into an accident, and that is their unwholesome Kamma. So it's not just the fact that someone's in a motorbike accident, whether it's an unwholesome Kamma or not, it's the decisions that led to it. And the decisions that led to this particular motorbike accident, I wasn't doing anything unwise. I was just driving the motorbike down the street, coming around the turn, and there was this centrifugal force, there was water on the road, and then I had the accident. But there was no randomness in that. There was a sequence of events that led to that situation.
Yeah, I'm not saying randomness as in everything you can be described as a chain reaction, which I understand. But another unenlightened driver might do exactly the same things that you have done and still get in that accident. He would experience the same end result as you have, and they were unenlightened. So this is where I'm asking, you're saying I didn't experience unwholesome karma, I just experienced impermanence, or the things that you're, as an enlightened being, I'm going to experience anyway. But another person might experience the same thing, and it would be defined as unwholesome karma.
It depends. Each situation is different. That's where you need to look at your own situation, and you need to see the sequence of events that led to it. You're not going to be able to see someone else's karma 100% because you don't know all the decisions that that person made. But for your own decisions, you'll be able to understand that. The more you understand this natural law, you'll be able to see your own decisions that led to any particular result. But you need to peer into this natural law and be able to understand it more closely before you're going to be able to see your decisions are leading to any particular result, and there's no randomness in it whatsoever. It's always a cause and effect relationship. And you're not going to do that in the next 2 minutes, right? Awakening to the natural law of Kamma is something that you need to think about. So when you're learning like this in a class, you're not going to understand it necessarily 100% from the very beginning. So take your time. Don't feel like you have to get it right now, today. Remember, none of this is based in belief. You need to be able to see it through your own direct experience, and that's what's going to help you to be able to see it more and more. And that's what it means to awaken to this natural law, is that over time, you're cultivating wisdom to be able to see more and more clearly the truth about how things are happening in the world, so that you can make wise decisions that lead to more and more wholesome results for yourself. Liz, did you have a question? Oh, you have a question?
I was wondering, people talk about the concept of synchronicity. And so I'm just wondering, like, sort of as a tag on to this idea of randomness, like, what about the idea of coincidence? I don't know if synchronicity is necessarily a coincidence, but it's, you know, like when you perceive things in the world to be lining up in a certain way, is that self-will, or is that a result of karma? And how is it possible for us to know the difference?
Can you give me an understanding of what you mean by synchronicity?
Yes. So what I mean by synchronicity is when, for example, if you keep seeing the same person in different circumstances, or you say, you know, we have lived in different places at different times and we keep meeting up, or if you say something like, I've noticed certain patterns in the world. Is this because my mind wants to see these patterns and is attaching meaning to these things that happen?
Yes. That's exactly what it is. Everything you experience is cause and effect, or action and result. There's nobody controlling what you experience on a day-to-day basis. It's your decisions. There's nothing mystical or magical. While you can gain the understanding of God and these other beings that exist in the world, someone can gain that understanding and independently verify these things. That being isn't controlling what we experience. There's no entity called the universe that is controlling what we experience. Everything we experience is a result of decisions we made. So the fact that, using your examples, if you've decided to live a certain place and this person decided to live a certain place, you guys happen to see each other, hey, this is a result of your decisions and that person's decisions. There isn't anybody controlling that to occur, because we all have free will. And it's always our free will that leads to any particular result. And that's why the cultivation of wisdom is so important, because whatever decisions we make, we're going to experience the results of those. And the more wisdom we have of this cause and effect of this natural law, we can make wiser and wiser decisions that lead to a better and better result.
So I guess what I'm understanding too is that this is why there's so much emphasis in Buddhism on the present Because if you look at something from a lens of either synchronicity or randomness, even though they seem to be opposed, you're looking for the past and the future to come together, as opposed to each moment being an individual moment in the present that exists on its own.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying there. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you're always looking at what is the truth? What is actually causing this thing to occur? Because if it's something favorable, you would like to continue to make decisions in that regard. And if it's unfavorable, you'd like to no longer make decisions in that regard. You'd like to change what you're doing so that now you can experience different results, right? So I'll give you an example. Let's just say we're experiencing each relationship we're in. Let's just say there's someone who keeps abusing us physically, right? A boyfriend, girlfriend, 2, 3, 4, 5 relationships. We keep experiencing this physical abuse. We're the ones that are choosing this person to be our partner. And there's something we're missing in terms of our wisdom about how we're choosing that person. And now if we take our time and if we understand how to look at this situation of who we're choosing to be our partner, now we can make better and better choices to ensure that we're not getting into a situation where we're getting abused physically, right? And there's multiple things along the way that we've decided that led to that particular outcome. But if we think of it as synchronicity or randomness or some other beings controlling this, or that we deserve this, or it's our punishments or it's our rewards or things like this, now we lose the ability to cultivate wisdom and make better decisions for the future, so that we can now get to a point where we maybe have a partner where we're not experiencing physical abuse. So everything we experience is a result of decisions, and it's through the cultivation of wisdom that'll make improved decisions and we'll experience improved results.
I have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
Is it in the process of detachment,
Mm-hmm.
is it unwholesome to see individuals as ciphers for lessons in the process of detachment? Or is that an over dehumanization that will obscure the detachment eventually?
Everything that you experience in life is an opportunity to learn, but it's not that this other person is necessarily teaching you anything. I mean, of course, you can learn from certain people that you choose to learn from, but the detachment of your emotions and your feelings to this person doesn't include what you're describing. Whether you choose to learn something from that situation or not is a choice for you to make, and you can do that through still being unattached to the individual, and you can still learn from that situation.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So what would be like an example of a unwholesome karma?
Unwholesome karma?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me go a couple more slides, and then you guys will, I think, start understanding this a bit better, okay? And then we'll come back to this.
And then can I ask
Yep.
something else? Also, the karma can be from a past life then.
Yes.
For example, it's not always what like that your actions right now because you're walking on the street and like of course those are decisions, but maybe something as he was saying, a natural disaster, but maybe that is from a past life that you made a choice, but that like lead to that, to be there in that moment in this life.
Let me
or
explain that
something.
to you as well after I do this. So re-ask those questions, okay? So let me give you guys a little bit more information so you can start seeing this more clearly. Because this wholesome and unwholesome karma relates to something we were talking about yesterday. And it also relates to something we were talking about on Tuesday as well, okay? So the way you create unwholesome karma, the way these harmful decisions get created, that now you're experiencing unwholesome karma, is through the poisons or the pollutions of mind that we were talking about yesterday. Whenever you're making decisions through craving, anger, or ignorance, it's going to produce unwholesome results in your day-to-day life. So craving is those selfish desires, the longing, the yearning, the wanting things to be a certain way. Whenever you make decisions through that, it's going to produce unwholesome karma or unwholesome results. When you're making decisions through anger, the hatred, the ill will, and all those lesser aversions like frustration, irritation, annoyance, things like that, it's going to produce unwholesome karma or unwholesome results. And whenever you're making decisions through that ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom, the confusion, the misunderstanding, misunderstanding, the misperceptions, this is going to produce unwholesome karma. So you can take examples that you've experienced in your day-to-day life, your experiences, and you can see how when you made decisions through craving, anger, or ignorance, it produced unwholesome results for you. So let's just say you have this longing, yearning for your husband or your wife to take out the trash. And now you really want them and expect them to take out the trash. And now you say, honey, can you take out the trash? And they say, sure, I'll take out the trash. And you're like, all right, I'm going to bed. I'll see you later. And now you go to sleep, you go upstairs, you go to sleep, and then you come down in the morning and you see they haven't taken out the trash. And now you get angry and you get frustrated and you get irritated. And now when your partner wakes up, you start yelling and hollering and screaming at them and you damage your relationship. This is coming from the craving, the anger, and the ignorance. And now maybe this person wants a divorce potentially after all this buildup of multiple situations like this. This craving, this longing, this yearning, this wanting things a certain way has produced the anger, the hatred, the ill will towards this other person, thinking that your painful feelings are coming from this person. And now because of that lack of wisdom, the ignorance, the mind thinks that the way to solve this is to be bitter, harsh, and hostile to your partner. And now as you're doing that through your craving, anger, and ignorance, it's producing unwholesome results for you. Or you could take this, let's just say you have a craving for money and you're longing, yearning for money and you really want lots of money. And now you're doing things at work where you're chasing after this money. And now as you're maybe getting a raise or not getting a raise, there's certain times where people aren't doing what you want them to do, and you start getting angry and frustrated and irritated and annoyed with your coworkers or your employees, and now you become bitter and harsh and hostile to them through your ignorance, your unknowing of true reality. So it's that craving, that longing, yearning that led to the anger that now led to this unwise speech where you're now speaking to people in unwise ways based in the ignorance, and now maybe you end up getting fired from your job. And now even though you were wanting and longing, yearning for money, what you ended up with is actually a lack of money and a lack of wealth because you go through maybe 3 months of unemployment or something like this. So anytime you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, it's going to produce unwholesome karma or unwholesome results. But then you can make decisions through the 3 wholesome roots of generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, which is now going to produce wholesome karma or wholesome results. Because generosity is the exact opposite of craving, desire, attachment. Generosity is where you're living open-handedly, giving and sharing with others without any expectation of anything in return. And this is always going to produce wholesome results or wholesome karma. Or loving kindness, which is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. Whenever you're making decisions through this, through your intention, speech, and actions, you're being loving and kind, it's always going to produce wholesome results for you. And then there's wisdom. Your wisdom is there about the natural laws and all the teachings that the Buddha shared. If you're cultivating wisdom and you're making wiser and wiser choices, you're going to be able to make wiser and wiser choices that lead to any particular result, which can then be wholesome because you're making your decisions based on these natural laws. So this is what's going to produce the wholesome results for you. So the karma that you experience, because I think I answered your first question, now I'm going to answer your second one about the one life to the next, experiencing results. So you can experience karma from one life to the next, but it's not anything mystical or magical. It's not like a black cloud following you around or anything like that. The way that this happens is like, let's just say in a previous life, this individual Bob was sexually promiscuous and he was having sex with lots of different people all through his life. He was cheating on his partners. He was going out and having sex with lots of people all the way up until old age. He continued to do this type of activity. And now let's just say this person dies. And now, because they have craving, desire, attachment in their mind, they haven't got to enlightenment. They're now going to experience rebirth. We call it rebirth, but there's actually nothing that's being reborn. It's actually a new existence every single time. So this body and this mind of Bob, they are impermanent. They're going to go away. But the cravings and residual memories from the mind of Bob are now going to create a spark that creates a new mind. It's kind of like a fire. If it has fuel on the fire, if there's logs on the fire, it's going to create a spark, and that spark's going to be carried by the wind. And when it lands, it's going to create a new fire. So it's the same thing as if this mind of Bob has craving, desire, attachment in it. That's the fuel that produces rebirth. So now that those cravings and residual memories from that previous mind, the mind itself has dissolved because it's impermanent, but the cravings, desires, attachments, the residual memories are now going to spark this new mind. So now we have a new mind, and let's call that Barbara. And now Barbara is born into the world as a human being. And let's just say Barbara, now with those cravings from Bob, because Bob had all this sexual craving, now Barbara, as she ages, she starts having lots of sex with different people too. Let's just say she's married. She has sex outside of her marriage. Her partner finds out, and now that person decides that they're going to end their relationship. Barbara starts lacking wealth because her wealth is getting distributed through this lack of loyalty to her partner. She has to split up her assets and things like this. And now let's just say Barbara's having sex with lots of different people too. And now let's just say by the age of 40, Barbara contracts HIV, and now let's just say she dies from this, right? This is Kamma from her previous life, that Bob chose to not extinguish that craving for sexual activity and was very promiscuous. But that craving was motivating decisions in the new life. So in the new life, Barbara was making decisions that led to the results that she experienced in terms of contracting HIV and perhaps dying at a young age. So it's not like there's anything mystical or magical following us around. It's still decisions that we're making in a particular life. Because in this example, Barbara could have, maybe at the age of 18 or wherever, even 12 or 20, 25, 30, Barbara could have come in contact with these teachings of the Buddha, chose to learn and train her mind and extinguish the craving for sex. But Barbara, perhaps in this example, didn't even know these teachings existed, so therefore her craving persisted, and now she made unwise decisions in that life that led to the results that she experienced. So this is how you experience results from one life to the next. It's not like if you murder someone in your previous life, you are going to get murdered in your next life. That's not the way it is. It's not a one-for-one like that. But it's the cravings from your previous life that come into this new mind, and now this new mind, this new being, is making decisions based on cravings from your previous life, and those new decisions are leading to certain results in this life. So the cravings, desires, attachments that you have in your mind right now, some of those would have come from your previous life. And now you're acting upon those cravings. And now you have an opportunity to extinguish them. So your mind isn't longing, yearning, and you can experience improved results. Because as long as you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, you're going to keep experiencing unwholesome results in your day-to-day life. But it's when you bring down your craving, anger, and ignorance, and you gradually increase your generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, that you will now start experiencing more and more wholesome results. Even if you could snap your fingers right now and perfectly practice the teachings of the Buddha, which you can't, but even if you could snap your fingers and perfectly practice the teachings of the Buddha, you're still going to experience unwholesome Kamma, because you've made decisions in the past that you're going to need to experience the results of, meaning in this life, you've made certain decisions. And I'm going to give you some examples of that and show you how to extinguish it. But before I do, I would like to just be sure that you guys understand this unwholesome Kamma being generated from craving, anger, and ignorance, and the wholesome Kamma being generated from generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom.
My question of the unwholesome karma was more into not like what causes or to have like wisdom, kindness, more like because of what you said, that for example in your example of having a motorcycle accident, that you say that for you would be like a wholesome karma, but maybe for someone else would be like an unwholesome karma. So my question was more into that, like then an example of something like that is an unwholesome karma? Or because then why is it important to see like if it's wholesome or unwholesome, you're gonna experience it. Like, I don't know if I'm.
I don't understand. No. Sorry.
Yes, like for example, why in your case will be a wholesome karma to have a motorcycle accident, and in someone else could be an unwholesome karma. So what would be another example of an unwholesome karma like that, like a car accident, like something like that?
Okay. Yeah, I didn't say the motorbike accident was wholesome karma that I experienced, right? It was just a result of this universal truth of impermanence, that I'm going to experience sickness, aging, death, loss, and destruction. I'm still going to experience that regardless. Everybody's going to experience that. That's not a result of my wise or unwise decisions. It's a result of being in life and now experiencing the universal truth of impermanence. So it's still karma in that it's cause and effect, but it's not wholesome or it's not unwholesome. It's just from the natural law.
Thank you. Yes, because I understood that and I was like, how then does it work? But
yeah. And also, like I mentioned earlier, you might not have heard it, is that any one particular event that occurs in one person's life, it could be unwholesome karma. So there can be someone who has a motorbike accident that it is unwholesome karma, but there can also be situations where it's like this, where it's from the universal truth of impermanence as well. So it's not that if this occurs, this is unwholesome karma. In all situations, it's not like that. You have to be able to look at the situation and decide based on the factors of the situation. And this is where you'll be able to see your karma 100%, but you can't always see someone else's karma 100%.
Then it's not that important to think if it's wholesome or
that's okay.
Or wholesome, right? It's just like try to act into this.
It is important to know whether for yourself, whether what you're experiencing is wholesome karma or unwholesome karma, because you're going to need to figure out what are the decisions that I made that led to this result. And now let me make different decisions, right? Mm-hmm. So even though I knew that this motorbike accident wasn't from unwise decisions that I had made, when I was in the hospital the very first day, I said to my wife, I said, I'm going to need to figure out a way to start driving a car because I'm now 50 years old. This is the 5th or 6th motorbike accident that I've had, and this body can't take anymore. I'm going to need to get a car. And she's like, yeah, that's probably a good idea. Because I know that she drives a car, has a truck, and she hasn't had any accidents, right? You can drive fairly well in Thailand and not necessarily have an accident. It's very rare that accidents are occurring in Thailand in terms of automobiles. But with motorbikes, they happen quite a lot. So that's why one of my first decisions was, okay, I've had enough motorbike accidents. This is something I don't particularly care for that is occurring in my life. Let me make different decisions so that I can experience different results. And then within about a week's time, I had a new car. And that way I can now drive a car instead of experiencing continuous accident after accident. So you can have a particular event occur that for one person, it could very well be unwholesome karma, but for someone else, it may not be. And that's where the role of your role on this path is to figure out your karma and extinguish your karma. And that's what we're going to start talking about now, is how to extinguish your unwholesome karma. But you need to be able to see what's leading to the results that you're experiencing. So one of the reasons why I know what I experienced wasn't unwholesome karma is that there wasn't any craving involved. I didn't have a craving, desire, attachment. There wasn't a longing or a yearning. There wasn't any anger. And there wasn't any ignorance or unknowing of true reality. I was making decisions wisely, but it led to this result because of impermanence, because of the water on the road, because of the change of motorbike, that I went from one motorbike to another. I'd only had this one for 5 days. It had a higher center of gravity, and I was coming around the turn, and boom, it tipped over because I hit the water due to the centrifugal force of the motorbike. So there was just change. It was just impermanence that led to this particular result. So this is what I can see, but you guys probably can't see it because it's hard for you to see someone else's karma 100% because you're not the one making the decisions 100%. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead. Ask some more questions.
So, for example, in the case of a kid that gets sick,
Uh-huh.
and he's sick, he didn't do any of craving, anger, ignorance, and he just got sick.
Mm-hmm.
That would be karma.
Everything we experience is kamma.
But
whether it's wholesome kamma or unwholesome kamma is another question, right? Because everything we experience is a sequence of events. So just the fact that a being is born into this world, we had to have a certain amount of wholesome kamma just to get into the human world. But the fact that we were born into this world and we are affected by impermanence, and this body does experience sickness, this is a result of our decisions, because we chose not to get to enlightenment in our last life. And now we're born into this life, and now even a child experiencing sickness, this is kamma. This is the results of decisions that being made, right? Because if they would have gotten to enlightenment in their last life, they wouldn't have experienced this rebirth and now had the opportunity to become sick in this life. Each situation's different. You can have sickness that is unwholesome kamma, but you can also have sickness that's not unwholesome kamma. I'll give you an example. So my mom, she died when she was 66 years old. All throughout her life, she ate really unhealthy food. I don't know if you know what TV dinners are, frozen food, right? This is like one of the worst foods you could eat, because they extract all the nutrients out of the food. They put all kinds of sodium into the food. They preserve it, and it sits there on the shelf in the freezer. And then you basically pop it into the microwave or wherever you're going to cook it, and then you eat it. My mom ate this food for multiple years, and that's all she ate. And there were multiple times where I went to her house and I showed her how to go to the store, buy fresh vegetables, steam them, cook them, prepare healthy, fresh food. And while she might have done it for a week or so, she never changed her habits. She always ate this food. And because of this, she ended up getting pancreatic cancer, and she ended up dying, right? Because of the unhealthy food that she was eating. Those were unwise choices that she was making that led to that illness and that sickness. So while even an enlightened being will experience sickness, aging, death, loss, and destruction, in this particular situation, this was a result of her unwise decisions. And I know that because I know her well, and I know the decisions that she was making. But in another situation, someone else could still experience a certain sickness, and it's not unwholesome kamma. It's just impermanence that they're experiencing, because this body is impermanent. So each situation is going to be slightly different, but you need to be able to see your decisions that are leading to any particular result, because that's where you're going to be able to clean up those decisions and then experience improved results. And you'll be able to see that for yourself, but you won't always be able to see it for someone else, unless you know them really well, like I knew my mom. Okay, so now let me help you understand how to eliminate your unwholesome kamma, okay? Because that's what you're working to do on this path, among other things, is to eliminate all your unwholesome kamma and get to the point where you're only experiencing wholesome kamma. So the Eightfold Path is the complete perfect plan that's going to help you to train your mind to eliminate craving, anger, and ignorance, and start making wiser and wiser decisions, so that you're practicing generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. So as you bring your practice up to practicing the Eightfold Path more and more, as you practice that for an extended period of time, you will extinguish all your unwholesome kamma, because you're going to experience these results coming back to you. And now you're going to need to practice in a way where you're making wiser and wiser and wiser decisions. The way that you can think about it is like a garden hose. All throughout our life, we've been putting mud into our garden hose. And when we're putting mud into this garden hose, now, all throughout our life, we've got this impacted garden hose that's impacted with mud. But now, on the path to enlightenment, we might decide to hook this hose up to the faucet and open up the faucet and start getting clean water coming through this garden hose. Well, when if we come to the temple, say once every 6 months, if we're meditating once a month, if we're reading a book once a year, okay, we've got like a little drip going through this garden hose. And we're not going to clean out that impacted garden hose with mud in this lifetime. It's just not going to happen. But if we're coming to the temple regularly, if we're reading books, if we're meditating regularly, you're consulting with a teacher, you're really actively learning and growing on the path, that's like opening up the faucet and getting more and more clean water coming through the garden hose. And now as you're putting clean water in the garden hose, it's going to spit mud for a period of time. Even though you've got this clean water going into the garden hose, it's going to spit mud. So you're going to get mud and mud and mud and mud, right? And then eventually, if you put enough clean water into this garden hose, you're going to get some clean water coming out of this garden hose. But then you're going to get some more mud, some more mud, some more mud. But then because you're still putting clean water into the garden hose, there's going to be clean water, clean water. But then you're going to get mud, mud, clean water, clean water, clean water, mud, clean water, clean water, clean water, clean water, clean water, mud. And eventually you're just going to get all clean water if you put enough clean water into this garden hose. So it's the same thing as if you put enough wise decisions into your life, eventually you're going to flush out all of these unwise decisions that you made in the past, and you're going to get nothing but wholesome Kamma coming back to you. Okay, so let me give you some examples of this from my own life, where you can use the Eightfold Path to extinguish your unwholesome Kamma that's coming back to you, putting more and more clean water into your life. So when I grew up in a very hostile environment with my parents and my family. There was a lot of anger and bitterness and harshness and hostility growing up. And that's what I learned as a child. And that's what I used to do even into my adulthood. I was polite and respectful to a certain degree, but there was always a certain amount of bitterness and harshness and hostility. So when I met my wife, of course, during the honeymoon phase, for the first few months, I was really nice and polite and kind and all this kind of stuff. But then over time, the relationship gets established and you start being a little bit bitter and harsh and hostile. And I was doing that with my wife all throughout our relationship. And at the 11-year mark, I decided I'm done with all of this hostility. I'm done with all this bitterness, and I need to change the way that I do things. So I started practicing the teachings of the Buddha very, very closely. And I started being polite and kind and friendly and respectful. I started practicing things like right speech, where I was speaking at the proper time. What I said is true, gentle, beneficial, with a mind of loving kindness, and all these other teachings. But because I was bitter and harsh and hostile in the past, my wife was still being bitter and harsh and hostile to me. So there would be times where I would come home and she would just start yelling at me, right? And she would just be upset with me. And when I would see that, in the past, I might have been bitter and harsh and hostile to her back, but that would be putting more mud into your garden hose. But now I realize I need to put clean water into this garden hose. I needed to get this mud out. So now when this mud was coming back to me, this bitterness and harshness and hostility, I would just choose to walk away, right? I would just walk away because I wasn't interested in fighting. I wasn't interested in arguing. I knew that just putting that out into the world was putting more mud into the garden hose. So I would just walk away in some cases. As I started gaining more and more control over my mind, as I would be around her and she would be bitter, harsh, and hostile to me, I would listen to her and listen to what she had to say. And then after she was done, I would say, "Thank you, dear." And I would why her, and then I would walk away. Right? And then as I started getting more and more control over my mind, and I understand that she had to extinguish her craving, anger, and ignorance. She had to get it out. So sometimes I would come home and then she would be bitter, harsh, and hostile with me. And I would say, "Yeah, you're right. I was a terrible husband. I did do that. You're right. I was making such unwise decisions. But what about now? How am I doing now? Am I making those same unwise decisions?" Right? I would kind of egg her on a little bit, where I was trying to get her anger and hostility and bitterness to come out. I was like, "Yeah, you're right. What else did I do? Yeah, I did some horrible things. Tell me about it. What did I do?" And she would yell and holler and scream. And eventually she got to the point where she extinguished her anger, because she could see that it wasn't me that was being angry and bitter anymore. It was her, because I wasn't putting out any hatred. I wasn't putting out any frustration or agitation. I wasn't putting out any unwise speech. I was only being gentle and warm and kind and loving with her. So it took about 1.5 years, but over time, there was longer and longer gaps between the time that she was being bitter and harsh and hostile, till eventually it just stopped, because there was no more mud. So now, for the last 5 or 6 years, she hasn't been bitter and harsh and hostile to me at all. And that's because I haven't been that way with her. So starting back about 7 or 8 years ago, I started to make this transformation where I stopped being bitter, harsh, and hostile to people. And now there's nothing but love and kindness that's coming back to me. So using this example of my wife, as I was polite, kind, friendly, respectful to her for an extended period of time, she could see more and more that that's what I was doing and that's what she was choosing to do. But I had to extinguish this kamma. I had to experience this bitterness and harshness coming back to me because that was my unwise decisions from the past. Then I had to extinguish another part of this because I was noticing that my son, at the age of 6, he was talking disrespectfully to his mom. He was being bitter and harsh and hostile to her. So I had to start teaching him about the path to enlightenment and right speech and all these things, and helping him to improve his relationship with his mom, because he was conforming to what I had done in the past, because he had seen me function a certain way with his mom, and that's the way he was starting to function with his mom. So I needed to clean that up too. So now it's been 5, 6, 7 years that our family is completely peaceful. There's no arguments. There's no bitterness. There's no hostility. Everybody talks, has discussions where we still disagree with each other sometimes, where in the past we would be bitter, harsh, and hostile, and it was like a fight to death. Now we sit down and talk to each other. We have discussions with each other. And now at the end of the conversation, we still might disagree with each other, and that's okay. We walk away from the conversation still disagreeing with each other, but we figure out a way that my wife is able to accomplish what she needs to accomplish, and I need to accomplish what I need to accomplish. That we're not trying to force each other to do things my way, where in the past that wasn't the case. So we had to learn this better way of life, and we needed to start functioning in that way for an extended period of time so that we could all switch and we could all transition the way that we functioned. And that comes through training of the mind, and that's how you extinguish your unwholesome kamma. So there are certain relationships that, as I mentioned yesterday, that you're going to need to let go of. You're going to need to just walk away from. That you know that there's too much bitterness and hostility in that relationship. You're not committed to it, and you need to just move on. And that's the way for you to clean up that unwholesome kamma, is just move on from the relationship. There's a second type of relationship that you're more committed to. Like with my wife, with my son, with my mom. And I needed to do some work on my mind so that then as I worked on my mind, I could improve in this relationship. And now you'll improve those relationships. But then there's a third category of relationships, brand new people that you've never even met before, that you'll only ever practice being generous, having loving kindness and wisdom. And now in those relationships, you'll only experience wholesome results. So like the students that I spend time with, I've only experienced wholesome results from the students. That's why when I got in the motorbike accident, within 5 days, students had donated over $18,000 to be able to buy me a car. Because for the last 7 or 8 years, I've just been teaching these teachings and helping countless people without any expectation of anything in return. And I've just been giving and giving and giving and giving with generosity, with loving kindness and wisdom. So when I experienced this situation where I needed a car, the students said, yeah, we're going to get you a car. Here's the funds to go be able to do that. And there were countless people who ended up donating for that. And that's the wholesome kamma that came back. Where before, when I was bitter, harsh, and hostile, nobody was ever going to buy me a car, right? Nobody was ever going to do that for me, right? That was up to me to do that. Where now, being loving and kind and warm and gentle, there's more than enough people. Whenever I'm trying to accomplish anything, there's tons of people that are willing to contribute because they know that David's trying to help countless people. Where in the past, I was causing harm to people. And there were some people that were helping me if I paid them a salary or whatever, and not to pay them a salary to harm people, but, I was being bitter and harsh and hostile to a certain degree. So in those situations, I was experiencing unwholesome results, where now it's nothing but wholesome results. Every time I experience anything, it's always wholesome, because you need to clean out this mud. You need to get up and running on the Eightfold Path for an extended period of time, so that now when these unwholesome things are coming back to you, that you extinguish it. So when the unwholesomeness was coming back to me from my wife being bitter, harsh, and hostile, I knew that this was my kamma. and I had to extinguish this. And the only way for me to do that was to practice generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom with her. So like when I was at the market and I was buying myself some orange juice, I'd be like, there's some avocados. Avocados are pretty rare in Thailand. My wife really likes avocados. You know what? Let me buy her a couple avocados and practice some generosity with her. Not because I wanted or expected anything from her, but just because I was interested in practicing generosity. And now she could see, he really cares for me. He really loves me. He's helping me to experience these things. So over time, she was able to see my husband is only doing things that help me and benefit me, where before I was doing things that were harmful to her, where now she's not experiencing any harm from me. So therefore, I'm not experiencing any harm from her because I've extinguished this. So you're going to need to extinguish your unwholesome kamma, because in your relationships, you've caused harm in those relationships, and you're going to need to clean those up. And the way you do it is through the Eightfold Path. Through practicing right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. As you dial this into your life closer and closer, and you get up and running on it, and you practice it for an extended period of time, you'll extinguish all your unwholesome kamma. So that's why you need to really start with soaking in the Eightfold Path and understanding it deeply. So any questions here about how to extinguish your unwholesome kamma? Looks like Hugo's grabbing a mic.
I know somebody that was 3.5 years old and he was hit by a car. Was the karmatic consequence on the driver or on the child that crossed the road?
They're both. Oh, sorry. I thought
on both.
They're both experiencing kamma in that situation. There's a sequence of events that led to that. It's not that one person is experiencing kamma and one person is not. Everything you experience in life is kamma.
Okay.
Your mic went out.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Is that better?
A little bit.
Yeah. In the case of somebody like Gandhi, for example, that went through his life planting flowers and he ended up getting killed, is that past karma, current karma?
I don't know his life. I don't know him that well, so I couldn't say exactly what he experienced and why he experienced it. This is why I'm sharing with you what you would like to do is focus on your own kamma, the results of your decisions. Now, you can, in some cases, see the results of other people's decisions, particularly like if you watch the news, right? If you watch the news, essentially what they're reporting on is the day's kamma, the cause and effect of things that have occurred. You can see it in some situations, but not every situation. So I don't know that gentleman. I know of him, but I don't know his life, so I wouldn't be able to say, why he experienced any one particular thing.
One can go through life in thousands of trees, and one day a big branch come down and kill that person that he was planting so many trees. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, that can still happen because you're still going to experience aging, sickness, death, destruction, and loss. You can't escape that. So again, getting to the point where you're only experiencing wholesome kamma doesn't mean everything in the world happens your way, in the way you want it to happen. That's not what wholesome kamma is. It's not that everything's going to happen your way. That's not what it means to only be experiencing wholesome kamma.
Okay.
You're welcome. You guys are going to need to look at this more closely, and you're not going to be able to see it right away. And this is where a person can have certain challenges and struggles to be able to see these things. And as they're facing that, it becomes uneasy for them, and they're not willing to step forward and look at it. You guys are looking at it, but sometimes people don't look at it, right? They come up against something like the Natural Law of Kamma. They have difficulties understanding it, and then they just push it away. And I don't suggest that you guys do that, and that's not what you guys are doing here at all. but just understand that you're not going to understand what I'm teaching you right away. Something like the universal truth of impermanence, you guys got it in about 3 minutes, 5 minutes. Something like discontentedness, maybe 5 minutes, 8 minutes, you guys got that. But as you progress a little bit further into the journey to enlightenment, there's going to be certain teachings that sometimes take you 6 months to a year even to understand. There's a teaching called dependent origination that is like the highest, most ultimate truth of the Buddha. Sometimes it takes people 6 months to a year to even understand that. There was a student here one time when I was teaching, and he was sitting right here actually. He had been studying with other teachers, and he was trying to learn dependent origination, and he sat here in a retreat. I taught it, and he got it. And he was like, oh my goodness, I've been trying to understand this for 10 years and I've never understood it until I just heard what you just said. And now I got it. Now I understand it. So there's going to be teachings like that where you're going to need to really chip away at it. And this is one of those first big teachings, is to start to understand the natural law of Kamma and start stripping away your beliefs, your opinions, your views, your perceptions, because you guys have been exposed to different things, that it's good luck, bad luck, that it's destiny or fate, or that it's randomness, or that it's God that's controlling things, or that it's the universe controlling things. So you're going to need to be able to peer into your own life to be able to see the things that you're experiencing. And then when you see the things that you're experiencing, either wholesome or unwholesome, you can look at the decisions that you're making that's leading to that. And if you see that it's an unwholesome result, there's going to be craving, anger, and ignorance there. And if it's a wholesome result, you're going to see that it's generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom that led to that. So you will be able to see this within your own life. And when you have difficulties doing that, that's where you can reach out to me and let me know. You can say, hey, David, I'm experiencing this thing and I don't understand why I'm experiencing it. Here's the decisions that I've been making. And then I'll be able to help you to see why you're experiencing that thing. And now you cultivate wisdom, you make different decisions, and then you'll experience different results. So seeing the natural law of Kamma within your own life is what's going to really help you to see it very clearly. Every once in a while, you can see it in other people's life too, but it's not as easy because you don't know 100% of the decisions that they're making in their life to be able to see it very clearly. Adrian, you have a question? Yeah, you guys need to change the batteries back there. There's a box with batteries. I haven't seen anyone changing them during the course.
Yeah. So you were saying that craving can be extinguished, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And you were helping your wife through that. Mm-hmm. Now, she still could have experienced, or anyone extinguishing their craving can still experience unwholesome karma through extinguishing a craving, right?
Say that again.
So anyone who's extinguishing a craving, like can experience unwholesome karma through doing that.
You're not going to experience unwholesome karma having extinguished a craving.
Yeah.
But there's a transitionary period. Like say today you decide that you're no longer going to function through craving, anger, and ignorance. Well, that garden hose of mud, you're not going to be able to snap your fingers and just instantly eliminate your craving, anger, and ignorance. So you're still putting mud in your garden hose every day right now because your mind is not enlightened. You're still putting mud in there. But when you gradually are eliminating your craving, anger, and ignorance, and you get to the point where you're putting less and less mud in your garden hose and you're bringing up your generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, eventually you're going to get to a point where you're only making decisions through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. From that point forward, you still have multiple years before you get to enlightenment because you have to extinguish all this old unwholesome karma that's going to come back to you. But you're going to be getting less and less and less unwholesome karma, because as you've been going forward in life, you're making less and less decisions and craving anger and ignorance. So you're going to be getting less and less unwholesome karma coming back to you. And you're increasing your generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom more and more. But there is, let's just say, a cutoff period where you're no longer making any decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance. Even from that point, you're still going to experience unwholesome karma, even though you're only practicing generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, because you've got this old unwholesome karma that's coming back to you. So that's why you've got to get up and running on the Eightfold Path as soon as possible, and then do that for an extended period of time. And that's what's going to produce the wholesome results for you, so that now you can extinguish all this unwholesome results through only practicing the Eightfold Path and wise decision making.
All right.
Okay. All right. So, you have another question? Yeah.
Well, it's not to this, but it's for something that you said before. When you get enlightened, then you do not reincarnate again.
You don't do what?
You do not reincarnate. You do not.
Oh. So you're not going to experience rebirth. Yeah. Once you get to enlightenment, there's no more rebirth after that in the cycle of rebirth.
And in Buddhism, it's like the belief that then what happened when you do not reincarnate is because you already went to higher dimensions, or because then you realize that you're everything, and or
there's no belief in the teachings of the Buddha. We can independently verify it for ourselves. And this word reincarnation isn't what the Buddha actually taught. He taught using this word, or at least the word in the original text is called samsara. And this is often translated to the cycle of rebirth. But the way that he describes it is it's a new existence every single time. So I encourage people to think about it as the cycle of new existence. When people are talking about reincarnation, they're talking about like a soul. And now this soul gets reincarnated into a new being every single time. And it's the same being, but just a different body with the same soul. This isn't what the Buddha actually taught. People will usually attribute reincarnation to the teachings of the Buddha, but he never taught that there is a soul, and he didn't teach that there isn't a soul. He left that as an undeclared teaching. And he didn't teach that you're the same being every single time, because that would be permanence. That conflicts with his universal truths. So reincarnation isn't something that he taught. He taught samsara, which is often translated as a cycle of rebirth, and I still say it that way. But the way that you should think about it is the cycle of new existence, because every single time it's a brand new existence, every single time. When you get to enlightenment, you've extinguished the causes and conditions that are producing discontentedness, which is craving, anger, and ignorance. You've extinguished that. So you're no longer experiencing discontentedness, but that's the same condition that's leading to rebirth. That if you have craving in your mind at the time of death, you will be reborn. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll know, because it's been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you haven't experienced any anger, any frustration, any sadness, any annoyance, all that's gone from your mind. So you'll know that your mind is enlightened. And you'll also know that you're not going to experience rebirth, because that dependent origination that I talked about, the highest, most ultimate truth of the Buddha, it's 12 interlinking steps that shows you exactly what's leading to rebirth and exactly what's leading to discontentedness as well. And what you're doing is you're dismantling dependent origination, so that you're no longer experiencing discontentedness and you're no longer experiencing rebirth. So when you eliminate discontentedness, you'll know that you've eliminated rebirth as well. And now the teaching of what happens to you once you die as an enlightened being, the Buddha leaves it as undeclared. He doesn't teach what is going to happen or what isn't going to happen. And I suggest that he did this wisely. And there's many things that I could talk about, if you like, to help you understand why I think he didn't teach it. You would like to hear? Okay, so a Buddha is only going to teach things that they've experienced for themselves, because if they experienced it, they know that it's true because they've experienced it. So one reason why the Buddha might not have taught what comes next is he never experienced getting to enlightenment and dying. This could be one reason why he didn't teach it. But there is the ability for a Buddha to understand something before they've actually experienced it. Because of their deep wisdom, they can understand something before they experienced it. So let's just say the Buddha did know of something that is next. And let's just say that next thing is wonderful and outstanding. Well, if he explained that to people about this wonderful thing that's going to happen after enlightenment, that's just one more craving that you have to get rid of, because now you're going to be longing, yearning for that. And now people are going to be trying to get to enlightenment in order to get to that wonderful thing, but they can't get to enlightenment because they're still craving that wonderful thing. So by choosing not to declare what comes next after enlightenment, it means the mind has to get to peace and joy right now, in the present moment, without a care or without a worry about what may or may not be next. And now, if you do get to enlightenment in this life, if there is something next, okay, great. If it's either going to be better or than what you're currently experiencing, or the same as what you're currently experiencing, because getting to enlightenment, your mind is so peaceful and so joyful, you're not going to care what's next, because it's either as good as what you're currently experiencing or better. But if there isn't something next after enlightenment, so what? The whole path to enlightenment isn't about getting to an afterlife. It's about getting to the peace and joy now in this life. And that doesn't require you to know what comes next. So the Buddha wisely, in my opinion, left this undeclared, that there isn't something that he said. He actually said, remember, what did I teach? He said, I taught this. And then he says, remember what I did not teach. I did not teach this. And he gives 10 things that he did not teach. And this was one of the things that he didn't teach, of what comes next after enlightenment. And it was important for him to make sure people understood what he didn't teach. So sometimes you'll hear people that will tell you that when you die as an enlightened being, you don't exist anymore. Or when you die as an enlightened being, you're going to go to some Buddha heaven and be with Buddha or whatever. The Buddha never taught any of these things. So as soon as you hear somebody say that, you know that it conflicts with the teachings of the Buddha, and you can consider that this person has misunderstood the teachings, and you can ignore that. Because I can show you in his own words where he left this as an undeclared teaching. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When I say what the Buddhist is not like trying to diminishing or saying, or like what he's like, it's just because I'm new to the Buddhism and I want to understand. So, and when there is this thing that they call what you disappear into everything, or all of these other teachings. So he never taught anything about like the nothingness and the everything. The Buddha never said anything like that.
Yeah, he doesn't teach that, once you get to enlightenment and die, you are now oneness with the world and blah, 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 blah. All that stuff is just like the mystical, magical stuff, the things that people talk about now. But that's one of the beauties about studying with the original words of the Buddha. You can see what did he teach and what he didn't teach. And you can have 100% surety on that, because you don't believe even those books. You don't believe those books. You learn it, you investigate it and examine it, you reflect on it to independently verify it, and you practice it. And then you'll see the truth for yourself of exactly what he taught. And then you'll see, if you practice what he taught, it leads to this enlightened mental state where your mind's peaceful and joyful. In that way, you don't have any doubt in your mind about what he taught. So that's why, like yesterday when we were talking about trees and plants and stuff, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm very confident in what I'm sharing, because I know the truth with 100% certainty, and I have the condition of my mind to confirm that. Where sometimes when you're not quite sure, you kind of like, your mind's wavering on things, but by the time you're experiencing enlightenment, you'll have your mind won't waver. You will have 100% surety on what is true reality, because your mind will help you to be able to see that. Because if you're not experiencing any anger, sadness, frustration, or any of these other feelings for multiple years, you'll know that you've gotten to final knowledge, and your mind fully understands the path. So this is your confirmation of that, because there's going to be people out there that teach all kinds of different things, and you don't have any way of knowing just by listening to that person talk whether what they're teaching is true or false. So you have to go back to something as a starting point, which is the original words of the Buddha. but now you don't even believe that. You have a tour guide to help you walk through that, but then you're doing the work to independently verify each individual thing. And that's where it can sometimes be challenging, because what you're hearing from a teacher, what you're hearing from those original teachings of the Buddha conflicts with what you currently understand. And that's actually really good, though, because what you currently understand hasn't led to this peace and joy that you're looking for. So when you learn something that is opposite of what you currently understand, that's an opportunity for growth and development. But some people turn away from that and they walk away from it. But what you would like to do is turn around and walk towards it and be like, yeah, this does conflict with what I currently think about the world. Using that example from yesterday, maybe you think like plants are living beings, and maybe that's what you firmly think. But now when you peer into it more and more, and you investigate it, and you roll up your sleeves and you sink into it, more and more you can see the truth. And then eventually you're like, I understand now. Where before the mind maybe had these hang-ups, where it was hard for the mind to be able to see what the Buddha is teaching you. But the more you step forward to approach it, you can gain that insight more and more. And now as you get that wisdom, your mind's going to get more and more liberated and more free. And you're going to get more and more peace and joy, more clarity in your mind. And that's how you'll know you're working towards enlightenment, because you'll see the benefits for yourself. And it's these teachings that are leading to that. Mm-hmm.
I know maybe too many questions.
You don't have to apologize for questions. If a teacher's ever angry at you for asking questions, you're studying with the wrong teacher. Go find another teacher.
Good. Thank you. So in these practices of meditations, when sometimes people have these experiences that they say that they experience nothingness and all of this, that is not true Buddhism meditations.
What the Buddha taught and what you can experience is something called emptiness, where once you clean up the mind and you fully purify your mind, there's this lightness, there's this brightness, this radiance in the mind, because it's now free, it's now liberated. There's this emptiness in the mind, where the mind is now empty of the pollutions, but it's going to be full of wisdom. The mind's going to be full of wisdom and all these other healthy mental states too. And that is referred to as emptiness, where the mind is now empty of the pollutions and now it's performing optimally. And somebody might say it's called nothingness or something like this, but I don't tend to talk about that very much, because that's just something you're going to experience as a result of doing all this other work. I don't have to explain that to you, because you're just going to experience it by learning all these teachings and practicing them. The emptiness and the nothingness, yeah, you'll experience that as your mind gets closer and closer to enlightenment, and you purify your mind of these pollutions. You will get to the mind's emptiness, where the mind is now empty of defilement or pollution or taints. And you'll be able to see that for yourself, because the mind's going to be so light, so bright, so uplifted, so cheerful, so glad all the time. And you're going to see, like before, your mind was kind of heavy and it was kind of bogged down and it was kind of burdened with things, where you're not going to have that anymore by the time you purify your mind. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Once your mind gets to that purity, it will never go back to the way it was before. It's impossible for the mind to regress. Once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, your mind won't regress backwards. Your mind's not actually enlightened until you get to the fourth stage of enlightenment. But even at the first stage of enlightenment, you won't regress backwards from that point forward. It's only forward progress. You have more? Yeah. Use your mic though, because I think the people online would probably appreciate hearing you.
And in the thing that you were explaining yesterday about the trees, because I started reflecting on all of this. Mm-hmm. That you mentioned that for a being to be considered living being, it has to have these five. What is the name?
5 aggregates.
5 aggregates. And that the Buddha didn't mention like they are not living beings, or the plants or that then we use the rationalize. But could it be also possible that as you're saying for us
The microphone's impermanent.
as you're saying for us to open our minds because we're learning, could it be also possible that we are not to get stuck into how we believe that communication or all of these 5 things need to happen in our minds, and that then maybe is another way different of how we think. Do you know what I mean? Like, what are the 5 like that you said is movement?
Yeah.
Is also able to communicate, or what was movement?
So this is why it takes time to deeply study the teachings of the Buddha and really understand them, because the mind's not going to understand them at first. So the 5 aggregates are form, feeling, perceptions, volitional formations, which are choices and decisions, and then consciousness, or the mind, right? So what you would like to do is take a teaching like this and first understand what each one of those things are. That's the learning, the examining, the investigation. Then you would like to reflect on it to verify whether it's true or false, because this teaching is describing what is a living being. So take things that you know are a living being, like a human being, a squirrel, these kinds of things, and reflect on it and say, does each one of these living beings have these 5 aggregates? And then you can confirm that through your reflection. Then you take something that you know is not a living being, like this mic stand or this chair. And now you reflect on the 5 aggregates and you say, does it have these 5 aggregates? And you can see, no, the mic stand doesn't have all 5. It has 1, which is physical form, but it doesn't have feelings, it doesn't have perceptions, it doesn't have volitional formations, and it doesn't have a consciousness. So this is how you reflect on it, and you independently verify that yes, these 5 aggregates do indeed explain a living being. And then you can look at something like a tree, which is a little bit unsure for you, and you can say, does it have all 5 of these aggregates? And then you can see that it doesn't have all 5 of the aggregates. And then you can see the truth for yourself that it's not a living being. So now you can start practicing, meaning you can start making decisions based on this new wisdom that you have. So maybe where in the past, if you walked down the street and you walked into the woods and you knocked over a fern, and the fern now is damaged and it depletes and it degrades, you don't have to feel guilty about it, because you didn't cause harm to a living being. All you did was bump into this fern, to this plant, which is a resource that now, of course, it's impermanent. It's not going to exist forever. And I don't have to feel guilty because I didn't harm any living being here. And now you can reside peaceful and joyful. Or if you'd like to use that fern for some other thing, maybe you're creating some craft project or some shelter, and you're like, hey, I can use this fern for that. So since I stepped into it and it's no longer going to continue to grow, why don't I use this resource for something that can be beneficial? So now you can make wise decisions in your practice based on having this wisdom of the 5 aggregates.
Thank you. Yes, it was more into thinking that maybe it would be something that I wouldn't understand yet, also like this form of consciousness, of a different form of consciousness of what I believe it is consciousness, or something like that. But then I also thought of what you said of having these termites in your house. Yeah. And then there is no way to really like getting rid of them without like killing them. And it was right now, and it was helping your family. So maybe thinking in that way of trees or plants or whatever, thinking that, okay, if I need to buy, to build something like shelter, it will be also that way. Like I will have to build a shelter from this tree. But that doesn't mean that that wouldn't be a living being if I would be expanding also into thinking that it's not just the way that I think is consciousness, or the way that I think that maybe they could have it. And then I realize that it's just maybe me trying to be right, and it's but it's just this part of being also then open to think that I don't have the ultimate. If it wasn't words of the Buddha, that then I wouldn't have the ultimate saying if it is or if it's not, that I'm not the one to choose if it is or if it's not, if I see in my mind. And maybe just the thing that I should focus is to try to practice on the best that I can, not to harm anyway, like in the animals. And if I do believe that this is a living being or not, just as you say, then consciousness, like if with consciousness, if I'm going to cut a tree, then planting 5 or all of these things. But it's just that part that made a little bit of noise on me, because I said, I'm not the one to choose really how others' consciousness is or not is, because I'm not even that wise now, to see.
So one of the things that I hear you saying occasionally, and this is common for someone who's just getting started, is you're saying, I believe this, or this is what my belief is, or this is what I'm believing. So you're going to need to cut through all of that and get to the point where you don't have these beliefs, that you know what's true and what's false, right? By the time you get to enlightenment, you will have no beliefs whatsoever. You will know the truth 100% in all situations. You will know the truth, because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. And now, if you don't know what's true or false, you're going to make a decision, connecting it back to today's topic, you're going to make a decision based on a false truth, and it's going to lead to unwholesome results for you, unwholesome karma. So if you're going to get to the point where you're extinguishing all your unwholesome karma and only producing wholesome karma, you're going to have to get to the point where you know the truth more and more, so that you can make 100% wise decisions. When you're functioning through belief, you don't know what's true or false, and you're going to make unwise decisions in some situations. So there's a lot more work for you to do, to learn and grow and develop and understand, and just understand that you'd like to get away from this belief and be able to see the truth, because we believe so many things in the unenlightened state because of our lack of wisdom. We just have so many beliefs. Like, we believe there's only one life. We believe that a tree is a living being. We believe this or believe that. And when you peer into it with the teachings of the Buddha, you'll be able to see the truth, because he presents it to you in a way that you can independently verify. So while the Buddha never said a tree is not a living being, he doesn't have to say that, because if he tells you what a living being is, now you can apply that to everything and anything in the world, because the world's going to change over time. And as it changes, if you know the wisdom of the natural laws, as things are changing in the world, you can still know what would be wise or unwise in any given situation. So the Buddha's not going to tell you every little single thing about every single little thing, but he's going to teach you what you need to know in order to be able to see these natural laws and then make wise decisions and discern for yourself what is the truth. And then the ultimate thing that's going to show you that you know the truth is the condition of your mind. That if your mind's no longer experiencing anger and sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings, that's how you'll know that you've gotten to final knowledge and the truth. So that's like your ultimate check, your ultimate gut check of whether or not you know the truth or not. Because if you still experience anger and sadness and frustration, all those other discontent feelings, you know your mind doesn't know the truth yet. There's certain things that you're believing that is leading to that. And once you get to this final knowledge, you won't experience that anymore. So that's like the ultimate check to know whether or not you're fully awake or not, is based on the condition of the mind. And being fully awake means you've cultivated wisdom and you now gotten to final knowledge. Yeah, you're welcome. I think Adrian has another question.
To clarify an understanding. So if I'm acting harmful, then that's producing unwholesome karma. If I'm acting harmless, then that's producing wholesome karma, right? So
yes.
So if we were to look at like sickness, aging, death, all of the things that you mentioned before, aging, sickness, death, destruction, loss. Mm-hmm. So I'm just trying to discern in the presence of that, if I'm acting harmless, if like what I'm putting out is harmlessness, mm-hmm. then that's not then those things aren't produced by the unwholesome karma of my current actions, right?
No.
But, oh, all right.
Okay, so what the unenlightened mind tends to do is it likes to see things as black and white. If I experience this, is it wholesome karma or unwholesome karma? What is it? And the mind wants to see it one way or the other. It's like black and white. But those things of sickness, aging, death, loss, and destruction, while you'll never be able to eliminate those 100%, no matter how enlightened you are, those things can also come from unwholesome decisions or unwise decisions that are harmful. They can come from the universal truth of impermanence, but they can also come from unwise decisions as well. It's not black and white.
Yeah, obviously. But, what I'm trying to understand here is, like I know that these things are all a result of impermanence,
But they can also be from unwise decisions too.
Yeah. But if I'm acting with harmlessness, like through my intention, speech, and actions, then it's not from unwholesome karma.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then it's just impermanence.
And that's how I knew that the motorbike accident I had was not unwholesome karma.
Yeah.
That it was just sickness, loss, and destruction.
All right, yep. Now, I'm remembering a study on water where they hooked water up to something, and people were like, speaking to the water and sending it love and stuff like that. Now, with that, it's got form, right? Because it responded to like that, and there was all these crystals and stuff like that in the water. With that, it's got form, it's got feelings. No, because it's got feelings, because it's like it's responding to the person's speaking that, right? It's got feelings, it's got perceptions, right? Because it's responding to what is being put out. It's got choices because it's responding, right? And it's got a consciousness because it's understanding. So therefore, is it a living being?
You just gave the same exact definition for feelings, perceptions, and volitional formations. You said because it's responding, it has feelings, perceptions, and volitional formations. Those three things don't have the same definition. So this is what I was describing earlier or yesterday to this gentleman. As I said, you guys just learned the 5 aggregates. I just got exposed to them yesterday. And the idea that you're going to 100% understand them yesterday or today and then be able to 100% see what I'm teaching you, it's unrealistic. It's not possible for you to do that. So what you've got to start with is you got to first understand what are the 5 aggregates, because right now you don't understand them and you're drawing a conclusion based on a lack of wisdom. So you need to start with understanding what the 5 aggregates are. Physical form is the physical form. The feelings are those pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. Happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria, sadness, anger, frustration, blah, 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 right? Shyness, that's the feelings. The perceptions are your views and opinions about the world, how you view the world and your views and opinions of the world, right? Like you might think that abortion should be illegal or that it should be legal, or you think, I know you're not in the U.S., but maybe you're a Democrat or a Republican or, these kinds of things, right? You have certain views or opinions about how the world should be, right? That's your perceptions. Volitional formations are choices and decisions that you make. You have free will. You can make your own choices and decisions. Then there's a consciousness, which is the mind itself. Okay? So when you look at water,
I see now.
It has physical form, but it doesn't have these other 4, right? So that's where you can see it's not a living being. Now, if somebody talks nice to the water and the water does a certain thing, and scientists are able to measure this, Why that's occurring, I would need to talk to the scientist. But I know that it's not from feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, or a consciousness. So I know that this water isn't a living being. Just like a tree. Like I was participating when I was in 5th grade, where half the class planted a seed, the other half of the class planted a seed. One half of the class talked bad to the plant, the other half talked good to the plant, and you could see that the class that talked good to the plant, it grew better than the people who talked bad to the plant. Why that occurred on a scientific level, I don't know, because I'm not a scientist, but I do know through the 5 aggregates that a plant is not a living being because it doesn't have all 5 of these aggregates. So this is where you need to be able to first investigate and examine something, make sure you deeply understand it, reflect on it to verify whether it's true or false before you start making decisions about what you think is or isn't a living being in this example.
Okay, so with that in mind, right, could that be a result of our us interacting with the 3 wholesome roots, for example, putting out loving kindness to the plant, being like, oh, like, wish you the best, grow and like whatnot, and now the plant grows more.
Yeah, I don't know. I would need to talk with the scientists to understand why is it that this plant grows better when we talk nice to it versus this plant when we're, degrading and belittling it.
Yeah, like being generous with it, like being loving and kind. And
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right.
Because I'm not a scientist. I know the natural law of Kamma, and I can explain to you that all day long. But when it comes to other topics, like how to do heart surgery, I have no idea. I've never done one. I've never even studied it, right? So this is part of being a wise individual and moving to a higher consciousness, is that if you don't have an ego, you can say, I don't know this, and you can just say it clearly and you know it, and you have no issues with saying you don't know something. And the things that you do know, you can say, I know this. So there's going to be some things in the world, by getting to enlightenment, you're not going to know everything about the world. So an enlightened being isn't going to know how to necessarily fly a helicopter unless they've studied how to fly a helicopter. So getting to final knowledge or getting to enlightenment is that you know the natural laws 100%. And that means the natural law of Kamma and all these other teachings of the Buddha. You will know that, but you won't necessarily know things about science or how to fly a helicopter or how to bake a cake necessarily. You won't know all those things unless you've trained in those things.
All right, great. Thank you.
Yeah. More questions?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
So that was my point in the thing of the tree, like what he said of the water, and what you say that, of course, we don't know everything, and even enlightened beings, we don't they don't know everything. So,
but they do know the natural laws.
Yeah, the natural laws. But then in this part that you said also that then maybe you will need to talk to the scientific. So that was my point, only to say that maybe just as open, like maybe then is this part that, because on the 5, sorry, my English is not that good. So one of them, you said that it was perceptions, right? Like, and you say, like, for example, us choosing if we are Democrat or this or that.
Beliefs and opinions about the world.
And then I would think of an insect, okay? Like the ways of perceptions are different of the human ways of perceptions. So maybe the perceptions of a plant are different of what we think right now, as we have studied or as advanced the science has gone. The perceptions of a plant will be different, as also as they go, humans, animals, insects, plants. So maybe just is not that they are not living beings, it's just that we haven't understand their 5 into them. You know what I mean?
So a plant doesn't have perceptions, and here's how you can see that, okay? So since you brought up animals, right? Animals have perceptions. They have views and opinions about the world. So for example, if there's a snake on a hiking trail and I'm walking down the trail, the snake can see me coming. It can perceive me as a threat, and then it can try to attack me because it sees me coming into its environment, and it perceives me as a threat, so it might try to bite me. right? A tree doesn't have that perception, because I could walk up to a tree and go like this and like I'm going to slap it, and a tree doesn't do anything. It just sits there. Whereas if I did that with a dog or a cat, there's going to be some reaction because they have a perception of what this means. To them, this means a certain thing, and they're going to react accordingly because they have form, feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, and a consciousness. But a tree or a plant doesn't have that perception.
But there are plants that do that. There are plants that actually had this, that you touch them and they remove the leaves. Or there are even plants that eat insects, or, you know, so that's what I'm saying. It's just like we could also be wrong into this. We could, you know, because
that's a biological response because you physically touched it, and now biologically it's choosing to do something.
Yeah, and that could be their perception.
So this is something you're going to need to look at closer, and your mind's holding on to this. I want a plant to be a living being. You're going to need to let this go. You're going to need to be able to see the truth. But there's more here for me to talk about. I kind of indulge you guys in a more of a conversation beyond just what we're talking about here. But I can assure you that a plant is not a living being. You're going to need to look at it closer. You're going to need to understand the 5 aggregates closer. You're going to need to understand that, you know, touching a plant isn't the same as what I'm talking about, walking up to it like this, where you're getting ready to hit it, and it now has a certain response, right? So there's more for you to learn, more for you to understand. You're not going to let this go in just one day. It's only been 24 hours that you've started to learn this.
Thank you.
So I'm going to move on, but you keep thinking about it, and you're always welcome to come talk to me, and we can talk about it privately, and I'll help you. Okay.
And I have a quick one before you
go.
Is
it about the natural law of Kamma?
Yeah.
Okay.
In the case that it was a karmatic action that was going to happen in the past, and you made a decision based on the available information, and then subsequently with a different consciousness, you realized that that was unwholesome karma. Is it any way to free yourself of guilt? Keep remembering and saying, oh, look, I mean, beside putting it off and cutting it off and putting it off.
Yeah. So why does the mind experience guilt? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was actually.
No, I'm saying based on what you've learned here this week, why does the mind experience guilt? You don't remember? Okay. So the mind experiences any feeling based on craving, desire, attachment. If the mind has a craving, a longing, a yearning, it's going to experience a conditioned feeling, which guilt is a conditioned feeling. It's a painful conditioned feeling. So the way that you eliminate conditioned feelings is you eliminate the cause. The cause of that is craving, desire, attachment. So if you eliminate your craving, desire, attachment, you'll eliminate the guilt. That's how you eliminate it. So it's that Eightfold Path that's going to guide you in how to do that with the mental discipline section. And then, of course, all the other sections as well. That's what's going to teach you to eliminate the guilt. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so I'm going to share with you guys one more thing here related to the Natural Law of Kamma, because when I teach the Natural Law of Kamma, sometimes people say, hold on a second, David, what about that guy who, they found his bloody footprint at the murder scene. He had a bloody weapon under his bed. His car was full of blood. He went to court and he got found not guilty. Didn't he escape his kamma? Because what you just said was that you can't run and hide from your kamma. Didn't that person escape his kamma and hide from it? And the answer is no, he didn't. There's other things that they're experiencing that you may or may not be there to see in order to be able to experience this unwholesome kamma. What they experienced is the imperfection of human laws. The laws of society are not the natural law of kamma. They are part of that in some cases, but that's not the entire natural law of kamma. So that person who went to court and was found not guilty, even though their bloody footprint was at the murder scene, they had the bloody weapon under the bed, and the car was full of blood, they're still experiencing their Kamma, even though they were found not guilty. And these are the ways that they experience that Kamma. They're going to still experience a bad reputation in the community. They're going to potentially experience sickness and disease, because in order to have enough craving, desire, attachment to kill another human being, you're going to have craving, desire, attachment in other situations too. And what's going on in your mind is going to put strain on the physical body and the organs, and you can experience sickness and disease because of this. You can experience physical and mental pain in this shorter lifespan, because again, when your mind is so congested with craving, desire, attachment, it's going to put stress on the organs, and your lifespan is going to be shorter because of this. They can still experience hostility, aggression, fights, and even being killed themselves. If they had enough craving, anger, and ignorance to kill in a certain situation, that's not like all the rest of their relationships are 100% perfect, right? They're still going to be having fights and arguments and disgruntledness and bitterness and hostility in their other relationships. So they're going to still have hostility, aggression, fights, and being killed in their other relationships. They're going to have a loss of income and wealth because they have to go to court and they have to defend themselves on this murder charge. They're going to lose a certain amount of wealth in order to be able to go to court and actually defend themselves in that court of law. They're going to be having difficulties in their relationships. It's like I said, it's not like all their other relationships are going wonderfully. If they had enough craving, anger, and ignorance to kill, their other relationships are having difficulties and struggles too. They're going to have challenges securing and progressing in employment because people in the community know about this murder, know that this person's bloody murder or footprint was there, the murder weapon was found under their bed, and all these other things, and people aren't going to be interested in hiring this person for a particular job. So securing and progressing in employment is going to be challenging for that person. Securing housing, right? Somebody's not going to be interested in renting this person a house necessarily, or having this person live with you, right? You're going to be scared to have this person live with you, and people aren't going to be interested in that. So this person's going to have difficulty securing housing. And they're going to have difficulty acquiring basic necessities to sustain life, like food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. This is all unwholesome Kamma as a result of choosing to kill, because you can't run and hide from your Kamma. They were able to escape from this particular human law. Remember, human laws are imperfect. We can aspire to create them more and more equitably, more and more fairly. But because human beings have craving, anger, and ignorance in their mind, when they're creating these laws, they're not going to be created and administered and enforced equally among all people. Even though we aspire to do that, it's not going to be possible because it's not 100% accurate. Then there's discontentedness itself and rebirth. That oftentimes people who murder and kill, they experience guilt and shame and fear, walking around with that their entire life. That's part of their unwholesome Kamma as a result of having killed. And then being reborn in a particular realm, whether it's the human realm or other realms, they can experience that as well. So these are results. These are unwholesome Kamma that can occur as a result of killing. It's not just going to court and being found not guilty. So when you're watching a news and you think that this person should be guilty and they're found not guilty, you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to be stressed about that. They're going to experience the results of their decisions. Or if you think somebody should be not guilty and they were found guilty in the court of law, you don't have to worry about that. That is Kamma, right? Say I was a gang member from 15 to 22 years old, and I was out there selling drugs and murdering and doing stealing and all this kind of stuff. But let's just say at 22 years old, I get away from the gang, and now at 23, 24, there's some murder somewhere. And now, even though I wasn't involved in it, somebody pins it on me, and now I go to court and I'm found guilty, even though I didn't do this. Well, all those murders that I did before that I wasn't ever prosecuted for and I wasn't caught for, but now 2 years later, I'm being prosecuted for this one. And even though I didn't do it, I'm found guilty. This is my Kamma as a result of the decisions that I made to associate with this gang. And now, even though I've gotten away, I haven't cleaned up my Kamma 100%. I still have to face this as a previous gang member, right? So you're going to experience the results of your decisions. So when you're watching the news and people are either found not guilty or guilty, don't worry. Those people are experiencing the results of their decisions, and you don't have to be upset or angry or frustrated by it. So this is to help you guys understand the laws of society. Okay, so normally what I do is I take a break here and then I move into this next topic of what is merit. But since I just let you guys go ahead and ask multiple questions, which was just me helping you guys, because I know whenever I see students really interested to learn, as a teacher, I'm motivated to help you. So that's why I just kept, letting you guys ask whatever questions that you had. So I've seen you guys taking breaks as I've been talking, which is fine. You guys can continue to do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move into this next topic so that I can talk about it. So that way you guys can get a nice, decent lunch in. Because if I take a break here and then teach this, you're not going to get a decent lunch. So let me just go ahead and keep going. And if you guys would like to use the bathroom or get some snacks or whatever, feel free to do that kind of stuff. So this topic of what is merit, this is wholesome Kamma at its core. This is wholesome Kamma, but it's a unique type of Kamma. So I'm going to explain this to you, what this is, because you're going to need to know this in order to make your way to enlightenment. Okay? So I'll just use this diagram because I'm going to shorten this down. Normally I talk about this for a good hour, but I'm going to shorten it down to about 30 minutes. Okay? So I'm going to use this image to help you understand what is merit. So in order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to practice generosity. Generosity is the giving and sharing of more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return. That's going to help you eliminate your craving, desire, attachment. That's what's going to help you train your mind to let go. Along with breathing mindfulness meditation and the Eightfold Path and everything else, you're going to need to integrate some generosity into your day-to-day life. And just like meditation, where frequency is more important than duration, the same thing is true about generosity. Your frequency of practicing generosity is more important than the amount, where you're sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources with others without expecting anything in return. So whenever you're sharing and practicing generosity, if you ask yourself, was this an offering to a teacher to support the continued sharing of the Buddhist teachings, helping others to attain enlightenment? If the answer is no, you're experiencing these benefits, that you're eliminating craving, desire, attachment from your mind, and it's helping you to generate wholesome results or wholesome Kamma, eliminating selfishness and getting closer to enlightenment. But if your offering of generosity was to support the continued sharing of the teachings of the Buddha, if the answer is yes, you're still getting those benefits, that you're improving the condition of your mind by eliminating craving, desire, attachment. You are producing wholesome Kamma to eliminate selfishness, but you're also helping other people to gain access to the teachings. This is what we call merit, that you've now produced merit because you've made an offering of generosity that's going to help others get to enlightenment, right? So there's lots of examples here. And the Buddha teaches you in his own words to make offerings of merit to someone who's in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment, or they're practicing to get into one of the 4 stages of enlightenment. Because if you can imagine, during the lifetime of a Buddha, there were thousands and thousands and thousands of people practicing his teachings, but not everybody was practicing them closely. It's the core group of people that were getting to enlightenment that the Buddha encouraged you to be able to support. Because if you're supporting those types of people, then other people can gain access to the teachings. So he talks about supporting the noble community, or it was referred to as the Aryan Sangha during his lifetime, or at least that's the Pali Canon. It means the noble community, somebody who's in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment, or one who's practicing to get into one of the 4 stages of enlightenment. And one of the things that the Buddha says down here is that any offerings that you make to these types of individuals, it bears great fruit, and it helps you to acquire the acquisitions. What he's talking about is that by you coming in contact with someone who's in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment, it gives you the opportunity to cultivate wisdom of how to get to enlightenment yourself. And any offerings that you're making to that person, it's helping that person to be able to then share the teachings with others, and you will be able to get closer and closer to enlightenment because you're coming in contact with someone who's able to help you with the wisdom of what it takes to get to enlightenment. And when that person is receiving offerings from you, what you should be able to see is that they're using a small portion of that in order to sustain their life. But then when he talks about whatever is giving to the community bears great fruit, what you should see is things coming back to the community. You should see a center that's well equipped to host classes and courses and retreats. You should see that this individual is willing to spend time to help you learn and grow and develop on the path, that there's resources to help you, right? So whenever a teacher is sharing the teachings in the way that the Buddha taught, they wouldn't be charging a price for the things that they're offering. Because as soon as you charge a price for your courses, it's an acknowledgement that you don't understand the path to enlightenment. Because in order for your students to get to enlightenment, they're going to need to practice generosity in order to be able to give and share and train their mind to let go. But also, if you put a price on your classes, courses, and retreats, right away, the most disadvantaged beings that aren't able to afford that and who need the teachings the most, they're not going to be able to get access to the teachings. So essentially, these people are locked into continuing to experience this lack of wisdom and continue to experience the unwholesome results. So if I charged $1,000 for the 5-day course, right away, certain people who can't afford that would never get access to these teachings. And that's not very loving and kind, and that's not very compassionate of a teacher to do that. So the Buddha teaches teachers that we should share these teachings with generosity, that we should give and share without any expectation of anything in return from our students, and then just teach anybody and anybody who's interested in learning the teachings. And that way, anybody and everybody who would like access to the teachings can get access to them. So when someone is making an offering to a teacher, it is helping you to eliminate your craving, your desire, your attachment, but it's also helping those disadvantaged beings who aren't able to be able to get access to the teachings to be able to get access to them. Because an individual who's sharing these teachings in the way that the Buddha taught would have given up their worldly life and entered into a life of where they're just sharing the teachings without any expectation of anything in return. And sharing the teachings at no cost doesn't mean there isn't a cost to share the teachings. There is still electricity and water and different things that need to be purchased in order to share the teachings. So whenever you're making offerings to an individual that is going to be sharing the teachings, you should see them using a small portion of that for themselves to sustain their life, but then you should see these things being given back to the community in terms of offerings of courses and classes and retreats and resources to be able to help you on the path. And there shouldn't be any price associated with those kinds of things. And the Buddha essentially is explaining that here. In Thailand, they take this very seriously. There was actually an individual several years ago that was doing the opposite of this. They were actually accepting donations as an ordained practitioner, and they were purchasing things like Gucci sunglasses and, Prada this and, different thing, Fendi bags and things like this. They were chartering private airplanes to fly around on and stuff like this. And the Thai people found out about it, because this person was putting it all over social media, and they ended up trying to arrest this person. They escaped, they ran away, they went to America, to the USA, and they put an Interpol warrant out for this person, and they had the U.S. police arrest them. And they arrested this person, and they brought them back to Thailand. He went through the court system. He was found guilty of fraud, that he was accepting donations on behalf of the temple, but spending it exorbitantly for his own benefit. And he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. So in some countries, they might use things like teachings like this in order to enrich themselves. And this is what some places are doing. But in Thailand, they don't do that kind of stuff. It's very rare that that occurs. And if it does occur, the Thai people will step in and they will handle it. So in this situation, while this person was wearing an orange robe and shaving their head, they're not a monk, right? They're not an ordained practitioner. Even though they were technically ordained, they weren't practicing the teachings in the way that the Buddha taught. And the Buddha gave a discourse on this during his life. He shared that if he was a cow and he was walking through the earth and he was stepping on the earth and the earth was soft and he was leaving his hoof prints behind, and there was a donkey behind him, and this donkey was putting its hooves into the same hoof prints as the cow. And the donkey was thinking in its mind, I'm a cow, I'm a cow, I'm a cow. The fact that this donkey was putting its hooves in the same hoof prints as the cow, and the donkey was thinking, I'm a cow, I'm a cow, I'm a cow, does that make the donkey a cow? And the answer is no. It doesn't make the donkey a cow. So the idea is that the Buddha is saying just because he himself was practicing the teachings and he was wearing an orange robe and he was shaving his hair and he was teaching the teachings, just because there's someone behind me that's trying to walk in my same footsteps and they think that they're an ordained practitioner, that doesn't make them an ordained practitioner. What makes you an ordained practitioner is your actions. If you have deep wisdom about the teachings and you're practicing those teachings closely and then you're sharing them with other people, helping other people get to enlightenment, that's what makes you an ordained practitioner, not just the fact that you shave your hair and you wear an orange robe. So when you're making offerings to a teacher like me or any other teacher or an ordained practitioner, you would like to look at the person's practice. You would like to be able to see what are the decisions that they're making, because however you support this individual, your offerings are going to go to that individual's choices and decisions. So if somebody's hitting animals, if they're gambling, if they're smoking and using drugs and alcohol as a teacher, an ordained practitioner, they're not very far in their journey on the path to enlightenment. And if somebody was supporting that, your funds are going to go to gambling. Your funds are going to go to drugs and alcohol and things like this. So the Buddha encouraged people to support practitioners who are in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment, or practicing for one of those 4 stages, because those were the people that were practicing the teachings the closest, and he could ensure that his teachings would continue to be shared in the world. And what this is doing for you is it's helping you to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, and support others to be able to get to enlightenment. So the Buddha teaches that generosity leads to the elimination of craving, desire, attachment, which is the cause of discontentedness, and it's the cause of rebirth. So by practicing generosity, you're eliminating the cause that's producing the anger and the sadness and the frustration and all these other discontent feelings. The Buddha refers to it as eliminating the stain of selfishness, that there's this stain or this pollution of selfishness in the unenlightened mind. And as you're developing more and more confidence in the Buddha, this is what's going to help you to decide to support others in being able to get access to the teachings of the Buddha. Because the more you investigate these teachings, you'll see that they lead exactly where the Buddha said that they do. Right now, you're just getting started, but the more you dive into them and the more you investigate them, you're going to see that they're 100% true. And more, you're going to get to the point where you eliminate your doubt. And you eliminate your doubt through investigation and examining of the teachings and through practicing them. And when you see the condition of your mind and the condition of your life improving, this is where you'll ultimately get to the point where you 100% eliminate your doubt. And as you're on your way to doing that, and you're seeing the improvement to the condition of your mind in your life, you might be interested in helping other people get access to these teachings. And that's where practicing generosity to support an organization or a teacher or somebody that shares the teachings of the Buddha would be able to help others get access to the teachings. There's a misunderstanding around merit that you'll even see here in many places in Thailand. People think that when you practice the generosity to produce merit, that you can transfer that to somebody else. Well, if you understand the natural law of Kamma that we just talked about, that you can't transfer your Kamma. If you understand that merit is wholesome Kamma, you can't transfer that to somebody else. So if you go make an offering to an ordained practitioner, they might gesture for you to get this little urn of water and pour it out. And as you're pouring out that water, they're going to be chanting. And the thought is that you're transferring the benefits of your offering to your dead relatives. Now, while this sounds really lovely and it sounds really warm and wonderful, the idea that we could do something now to help our dead relatives, while that sounds really wonderful, it's just not true. It's not possible. Because if you understand what is happening with merit is that you are enhancing the quality of your mind. You're eliminating craving, desire, attachment. You're eliminating selfishness by practicing merit. You're helping other people get access to the teachings of the Buddha. You can't transfer that benefit to somebody else. It's just not possible for you to help someone else eliminate their selfishness by you practicing generosity. They would have to observe you practicing generosity, and then they themselves would need to practice generosity. That's how they're going to eliminate their selfishness. So if you understand that merit is wholesome Kamma, and you saw the teachings of the Buddha that you can't transfer your Kamma to somebody else, then you understand that you can't transfer it. This is a rite, a ritual, or a ceremony or worship that they do to pour out this water, and they think they're transferring their merit to somebody else. So you can understand the truth. In these situations, whether you do these things or not, it's your choice, but I'm just helping you to be able to see the truth that this little ceremony isn't what the Buddha taught, even though you'll see it being practiced in different places. So the Buddha teaches you how to purify your offering and how to make an offering if you're going to make an offering to someone. He says that before you give, it's important that you're joyful. While giving, your mind is calm and confident. And then after giving, your mind is joyful. He was talking to a female here because she had asked him a question. So he's using the pronoun she, but you could apply this to any pronoun that you like, any type of individual. So what he's teaching you to do is how to protect your mind. That before you give an offering, you should think it through. Don't just haphazardly run into this thing. Think it through. Make sure you make a wise decision, because if you give too much, you're not going to have what you need to sustain your life. But if you give too little, you're going to have the selfishness in the mind. So put some thought behind any offering that you're going to make, and then before giving, you're joyful about the offering that you're giving because you know that this is what you can offer. Then while you're making the offering, your mind can be calm and confident while you're making the offering. And then afterwards, you can still be joyful, because after you make your offering, if you have remorse, like, oh my goodness, I gave too much. Why did I give so much? I don't have what I need for myself. Your mind's not joyful. You haven't put some thought into this. Or you're like, oh, wow, I didn't give enough. I'm so selfish. I'm so greedy. Why didn't I give more? If this is the case, your mind's not joyful after giving. So you would like to practice this in order to protect your mind when you're making the offering. Then he says, in terms of the person that you should make an offering to, in that previous discourse, he talks about looking for someone in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment. In this discourse, what he's saying is, look for someone who's free of craving, anger, and ignorance. If someone's free of craving, anger, and ignorance, they're an enlightened being. Then he says someone practicing for the removal of craving, anger, and ignorance. So if someone's practicing for the removal of craving, anger, and ignorance, they're going to know what those things are, and you're going to see that their mind's going to be functioning more optimally. So the Buddha understood that you're not going to be able to determine whether someone's in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th stage of enlightenment right now at this stage of your development. So he gave you kind of like a shorthand way of understanding this. What he shared with you is to look for a teacher, look for a person who's sharing the teachings where they don't have a muddled mind. What a muddled mind is where the mind is lacking concentration, it's lacking clarity. If someone has a muddled mind, their mind is still polluted and they're not practicing the teachings very closely. Someone who has a clear, concentrated mind and understands these teachings clearly, they'd be able to talk about these teachings with ease. They would be able to just easily talk about them because they're practicing the teachings. Essentially, their mind has been upgraded to this new operating system of an enlightened being. So if someone has a muddled mind, they're stumbling over their words, they can't figure out what they should say, you're seeing conflicts in their teachings, that they're conflicting themselves over this thing or that thing from one day to the next, their teachings are in conflict with each other, then this person hasn't deeply studied the teachings yet. So the Buddha teaches you to look for someone whose mind is unmuddled. And if you're making offerings to that person, there's a pretty good chance that this person is practicing the teachings closely. And that's how you can kind of look at it from a shorthand way of looking at it. But then more deeply, you would like to know what craving, anger, and ignorance are. And you would like to see if somebody has those things. If you see someone getting angry and frustrated, that's why I said to you, if a teacher ever gets angry at you for asking too many questions, you're studying with the wrong teacher. You should find another teacher, because a teacher who's either enlightened or very close to it wouldn't get angry at their students for asking questions. They should encourage that because their students are trying to dive into the teachings. And as a teacher, that's the best way to respect a teacher is to really dive into the teachings. The more you dive into them, that's like very respectful, because the person who's sharing without any expectation of anything in return, they're not wanting anything from you. If you're choosing to investigate the teachings, that's like one of the most respectful things you could ever do for a teacher. No matter whether it's a Buddhist teacher or an English teacher or any other teacher, that you're taking their teachings seriously and you're really penetrating into them. So that's exactly what a wise student would do, is really ask questions and dive into it. So these are some things that you can consider if you're going to make offerings to someone. The Buddha was asked during his lifetime about how to practice his teachings like very simply and very easily, because as you can see, his teachings have a lot of detail to them. They're at their heart, they're very simple, and they're very easy to understand once you understand them. And because of their simplicity, it makes them so profound, because the average person can understand them. But there is quite a bit of information to be able to understand. And as you're first getting going, you're going to need a lot of help to be able to understand those teachings. So the Buddha was asked, like, basically, can you boil this down for us? Like, what should we be doing on a day-to-day basis in order to be able to make your way to enlightenment? Well, of course, you're going to need to know the Eightfold Path and all those other teachings. But when he boiled it down, he said, okay, something that you can be doing on a day-to-day basis every single day in order to get yourself closer and closer to enlightenment is you can practice generosity, improve your moral conduct, and practice meditation. If you're doing these three things, you're making your way to enlightenment. So frequently, each day, if you're practicing generosity, giving and sharing without any expectation of anything in return, if you're improving your moral conduct in terms of your speech, your actions, and your livelihood, and you're practicing meditation, you're making your way to enlightenment. Now, you're going to need to know a lot more detail than just this in order to make your way to enlightenment, but this is just the way to simplify it, because it's the Eightfold Path that's going to teach you what is the moral conduct that you need to practice in order to make wise decisions about your moral conduct. It is the Eightfold Path that's going to teach you the meditation. But if it wasn't for the generosity to support the teachings to come into the world, you would never be able to learn the moral conduct. You'd never be able to learn the meditation. So this is why the Buddha taught it this way, because you're going to need generosity to be able to help your mind let go and eliminate craving, desire, attachment. So each day you would like to be practicing generosity, you'd like to be improving your moral conduct, and you'd like to be practicing meditation. And this is going to make your way to enlightenment, with among other things. This is a teaching from the Buddha that was really impactful for me when I learned it. So I usually share this with you guys when I talk about generosity. He says, this is titled, by the way, If Beings Knew the Results of Giving and Sharing. Monks, if beings knew, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they would not eat without having given, nor would the stain of selfishness obsess them and take root in their minds. Even if it were their last bite, their last mouthful, they would not eat without having shared it, if there was someone to share it with. But because beings do not know, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they eat without having given, and the stain of selfishness obsesses them and takes root in their minds. So what's the results of giving and sharing that he knows that other people don't know? The results is enlightenment. If what he's saying here is, if beings knew how peaceful and how joyful the enlightened mental state is, and they understood that it was generosity that leads to this peace and joy, they would not eat without having given, if there was someone to share it with, right? So that's what the Buddha is teaching you here, is that it's wise to give and share, because it's going to lead to this peace and joy. And since he knows that, he gives and shares, but because other people don't know about this mental state, and they don't know that it's generosity that leads to it, they eat without having shared it. So one of the things that you might decide to do is share your food. This is a great thing to do, because what you're doing on the path to enlightenment is you're becoming a better and better human being. And what we tend to do in the unenlightened state, even when we're in the human realm, is we tend to function very much like animals. And if you think about an animal, we're not animals, by the way, but if you think about an animal, they tend to hoard their food. They don't like to share their food. They will fight over their food. And that tends to be what we do in the unenlightened state as a human being, is that we will hoard our food. But you don't have to do that. You can give and share. If you went to the store and you got a bag of potato chips and you opened it up, you could send that around to your friends. And maybe it comes back to you and there's only one potato chip in your bag. Okay, eat your one potato chip and then go get another bag, right? Give and share. Or if you've noticed here in Asia, when we eat, we tend to put all the food in the middle, and then we tend to share our food. And this is the way that people practice generosity and giving and sharing. Because in a home of 4, 5, 6, 8 people, you might not have enough food for everybody, right? But if you put the food in the middle and everybody takes 2 or 3 spoonfuls and they put it on their plate, they eat those 2 or 3 spoonfuls, and then you take another 2 or 3 spoonfuls and you eat those little 2 or 3 spoonfuls. At the end of this meal, everybody might not be full, but everybody got some food, right? And now we're not all full, but at least we all equally kind of got a little bit of food because we give and share as part of this. So this might be something that you choose to do as part of your practice. You might start putting food in the middle and start sharing with people. Or if you order something at a restaurant for yourself, you might have the opportunity to share it with other people. And this would be a way to help your mind to practice some generosity. Because the generosity that you need to practice, you don't need to go like way out of your way every single day to be able to practice generosity. Like you guys heard me share when I was in the market buying orange juice for myself. I'm like, there's some mangoes. It'll take me all of 30 seconds to a minute to buy these mangoes, and I can give them to my son or my wife, or these avocados, or I share things with other people, right? So you don't have to like spend 3 hours a day to practice generosity. You can just integrate it in as part of your life. As you're walking down the street, you're going into the store and you're opening the door for yourself. It'll take all of an extra 10 seconds to hold the door for the person behind you. And this is practicing generosity. You're coming out of your house and you see your neighbors got trash blown all over their yard. Maybe it takes you 3 minutes to pick that up, 5 minutes to pick that up. Maybe they're not even home. Maybe they're on vacation and you just pick up their trash. You don't need them to know that you did it. You just did it out of the kindness of your heart. And now you put the trash away. That was some generosity that you were able to practice in that situation. So you can just do these little acts of generosity throughout your day. And this frequency is going to train your mind to let go. You would like to practice the frequency in your generosity. Whereas if you just had the opportunity to give, say, $500 once a year to this orphanage, that's not going to have the same effect as if you give $1 a day, every single day, because your mind's having to let go. Every single day, it's having to let go. So this is why if you go around Thailand, you tend to see a lot of donation boxes in like restaurants or even in department stores or things like this. You'll see donation boxes everywhere. So if you were attached to money, for example, you could put 10 baht or 20 baht 2 or 3 times a day in all these different donation boxes as you're going around Thailand. Maybe you're at immigration. Okay, you give 10 or 20 baht there. Maybe you're at the airport. You give 10 or 20 baht there. Maybe you're at 7-Eleven. You give 10 or 20 baht there. And each time, 2 or 3, 4 times a day, you're having to let go. Maybe you take your clothes out of the dryer and you see they're ripped and you start getting frustrated and angry and you realize you're attached to your clothes. Well, now maybe you give away some of your clothes and practice generosity. Or maybe you have a certain type of jewelry that you're really attached to and you're holding on to it. And if this jewelry went missing, you would be really upset. Maybe you need to start sharing your jewelry, letting other people wear it or giving it away or things like this. This is going to help your mind to let go, where otherwise you're going to hold on to these things really tightly. So your generosity is going to help your mind to let go, and you would like to practice this frequently throughout your day. That's what's going to really produce the best results. Okay? So this is one of the teachings from the Buddha to help you see that. Here, he's talking about how the gift of the teachings is more superior than any material gift. That if you were going to give and share the teachings versus give or share material property or material things, he says the priority or the superior gift is the teachings, right? Because you might not be able to give and share the teachings at this point in your development on the path, but you can support the teachings being shared with other people. Because if you were to press this button and your family would stay angry and bitter and harsh and frustrated for the rest of their life, or you could press button B and your family would be peaceful and joyful for the rest of their life, which button would you press, A or B? B, right? We pretty much everybody would press B, right? Well, it's not as easy as pressing a button, unfortunately, right? But we can share the teachings with people and make them available through supporting them. And that's what the Buddha is teaching you, is to support the teachings so that they can be shared with other people. And the more that you develop confidence in his teachings, you'll be able to do that. And then lastly, here he's talking about how there's this mutual support between students and the teachers, that there's this mutual support. He built this in from the very beginning during his life. Now remember, the Buddha didn't teach generosity to enrich himself. He was a prince destined to become a king. He was very rich and very wealthy, and he stepped away from that and went into this life of homelessness where he wore rag robes and he just ate whatever food people gave to him, and he even slept in people's houses. They offered him to come sleep. He was essentially homeless. He didn't have a home, right? But he shared the teachings. That's what his donation back to the people was helping them to get to enlightenment. So he didn't teach generosity in order to enrich himself. He was already rich. He walked away from that. He knew that that's not what led to peacefulness. He taught generosity because if you read his teachings, he practiced an extensive amount of generosity in his last life and his previous lives too. He was asked at one point, why is it that your mind has developed such mastery of your mind? Why is it that you've been able to get to this point where your mind is so disciplined and so well controlled? Well, he gives 3 different things that it led to that. The very first thing that he mentions is generosity. He said that's one of the things that led to me being able to master my mind, is generosity. So that's why he taught it, is because he knew for himself that he needed to practice generosity in order to master his mind and control his mind. So he knew other people were going to need to practice it too. So here he's just explaining this mutual support between students and teachers. So I went through this fairly expeditiously because we only had about 20 or 30 minutes to talk about it. But do you guys have any questions on generosity or merit or why the Buddha taught it, how it benefits you, and these kinds of things? For those of you guys online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So it looks like Liz has a question.
Thank you, David. I do have a question. This is in regards to generosity. And I'm wondering if it also applies to, joyful before you're giving, confident and calm in the act of giving, joyful after giving. Does this also include, is it possible to give something of yourself emotionally in Buddhism, or is that more of an attachment or craving?
Yeah, you can't give your emotions to anybody. You can give your time, effort, and energy.
Right.
You can do that, but you can't give emotion.
Right. But like giving someone like time or effort or energy or I guess what I'm conscious of now is like seeing someone's potential and wanting to help them with that, but overextending any of these alarm bells going off. That's an alarm bell that this would not be an act of generosity that would be beneficial. Yeah,
because when you're overextending, as you just said, that's your craving, because you're not in the middle with your generosity.
Wanting someone to see the good in themselves when they can't see it is not my responsibility. I cannot be a responsibility.
Right, that wanting. Remember the word you just used, that wanting, that's the craving desire.
Yes.
Where it's like, oh, it would be great if this person saw that they have the ability to make this thing better, and maybe I can help them to do that. So I'll ask them a few questions, but ultimately you're not doing it through longing and yearning. You're just doing it out of generosity. And then you know that you can potentially do this, but do it without craving, desire, attachment, where you're long in yearning.
How do you know? I'm speaking particularly about working with students, or sometimes I work with people that have addiction issues. How, I guess it's through development of wisdom that you know when you can sort of, when it's possible to help them identify their own craving as a fear, or when it's possible to just necessary to just back off. That just comes through wisdom and practice. It's not, that's not really necessary. It's not possible to know that without a specific instance.
Yeah, you can't know 100% whether someone has a craving in their mind or not, because from the outside looking in, two people could be doing the same thing, and one person could be doing it with craving, one person not, because it's what's going on within their own mind.
Right.
But at this point, I would suggest you just focus on your own practice.
Yeah.
But one of the ways for you to know whether you're having a craving or not, there's two ways. One is you're going to have a longing, yearning, and with your mindfulness, you're going to see your mind pulling towards something, wanting and longing, yearning for it. That's one way that you feel this pull towards something. The second way is there's going to be discontentedness. Whenever there's discontentedness, there's always a craving that's producing it. So when you experience conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant, that's like the red light on the dashboard of your car alerting you that there's a craving, desire, attachment there, and you need to look inward and figure out what that is. So if you ever notice your mind pulling towards something, you're just trying to hurry up and do something, that's a craving that your mind's working towards, because it's trying to get to those pleasant feelings, and that's the only way it knows how to do it, is get to the craving being fulfilled. Or if you notice the discontentedness, either conditioned pleasant feeling, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, you know there's a craving there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so one more thing before we head out to lunch is I teach you guys continued support, because now we're starting to kind of wind our course down. Tomorrow we're going to be going on a field trip. This afternoon I'm going to share some things with you guys. We have activity to do. But what you guys might be thinking about is, how to get support beyond this course, because nobody's going to get to enlightenment in 5 days. This course is 5 days. Nobody's going to get to enlightenment that quick. So you're going to need support beyond this course. So I'd like you to know that you have access to books, audiobooks, videos, podcasts, and quizzes. These are all available to you at no cost. All you need to do is go to our website and you'll find access to them there. You have access to in-person and online classes, courses, and retreats. That's also available from our website. You can see classes that are in person here in Chiang Mai, but I also travel around the world. As students invite me to come teach, you'll find me teaching in other parts of the world, and they're always available at no cost. Because the way that we set it up is that there's never a cost for learning with me. So I'm getting ready to leave in about 1 week to go to California, and I'm going to be teaching there. And if you were in that area and you'd like to come, you're always welcome. Anywhere I'm teaching, it's always going to be available at no cost. And you can also learn online too. So even when I'm in California, they're going to be live streaming it from there. So you could learn from that, or the classes that I teach here and I'm live streaming, you can learn that way too. We have 2 ongoing programs that are either in person or online. One is called the Group Learning Program, where over a 7-month period, we go chapter by chapter in this book. It's called Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. And each Sunday I go chapter by chapter by chapter. Remember, you can get this book for no cost on our website by downloading it. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions here by just reimbursing us for that printing cost, or you can get it on Amazon if you have access to Amazon. So the group learning program, it repeats itself every 7 months, where I'm gradually helping you to walk through that. In this particular course is about 2 months of that group learning program. Then volumes 2 through 13, that's the Words of the Buddha, the Pali Canon and English Study Group. Over a 1.5 year period, we go through volumes 2 through 13 on Saturdays. So these 2 ongoing programs, it's like dripping the teachings into your mind little by little each weekend. So you can decide which ones you would like to attend. Usually people start with the group learning program, then they move into the Pali Canon and English Study Group. But if you've been learning in this program, this course throughout the entire week, you could actually take either one of these. You could easily go into either one of these and be just fine. Then you can also get personal guidance through personal discussions, either in person or online. If you'd like to meet in person, just come and talk with me or send me a message. Let me know you'd like to talk privately and we can schedule something if we're in the same city. If you'd like to meet online, you can go to our website and you can schedule an appointment and we'll meet in Zoom. And this is available at no cost too. I'll sit down and help you guys as many times as you like. It's unlimited. Then we have a Facebook group where it's kind of like an online classroom where students are asking questions and I'm the only one who's answering. Other students might ask follow-up questions, but they don't answer your question. They don't try to help you because they know that they're a student. They're not a teacher. So if you post in there, then I'll be the only one that replies to you, but then other people might ask follow-up questions, much like a classroom environment. So these are all available to you to be able to help you, to be able to get access to the teachings. And as it says here, these are offered openly and freely to all beings. It'll always be available to you at no cost. So here's the time of the group learning program, Sunday and Wednesday at 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. And this is Thai time. And I do it 2 times because of the different time zones. So when I'm here teaching on Sunday morning, Europe is usually sleeping, but Australia and parts of Asia and North America, Central America, and South America are awake. So those people might be learning during that time. But then at 9 p.m., Europe is now awake. Australia and East Asia is starting to go to sleep, but North America is now available for them, North, Central, and South America. So depending on what time zone you're in, there should be a class available for you that's live. But then also they're recorded. So if you can't attend live, like you're traveling, you're in an airport, or you can't make the live class, there's the recording for you. So this is when I'm teaching the regular ongoing classes. Okay, so this afternoon, I'm going to share some things with you guys to help you integrate the teachings into your day-to-day life, and then we're going to do an activity together. But before we break for lunch, I just would like to share with you guys that if you've been practicing any generosity here, like helping to take out the trash, or some people, choose to buy me some lunch, or some people put financial support in the donation box to help us pay for lights and electric and all that stuff, I would like to just tell you I'm very appreciative of your generosity. Thank you for your support, because by you guys supporting what I do, it allows me to help you and it allows me to help others as well. There's people all over the world that I support. There's like people in remote villages in Africa that write me messages sometimes and they say, hey, we don't even have a library in our city, but we have access to the internet and I'm able to download your books. Thank you so much for helping me, right? And they might schedule personal guidance with me. They tell me that they live on $50 a month. They have no access to resources and they'll never make any donation to me, maybe in terms of financial support, but I'm able to help them because there are people that are able to help me to be able to provide the support that I need. So I just like to share with you, I'm very appreciative and very thankful of any support that you give me here. And there's students typically showing up that are sweeping or vacuuming or cleaning bathrooms. And I don't even ask them to do this. They just do it because they're interested in seeing you guys get access to the teachings. Like all these snacks that you guys have been eating, this is from our students that are choosing to offer this to you, the water and all this stuff. So maybe at some point you might decide that you would like to help other students get access to these things. So thank you for your support to be able to do that. And at the same time, even though I've been practicing generosity with you guys, sharing these teachings all week long, and I'll continue to do that long into the future, I actually do have an actual gift that I would like to give you guys. If you notice this picture that I use of Gotama Buddha, it's very different than what you probably see at any other place. Oftentimes you see him wearing a crown and a headpiece and stuff like this. He actually didn't look like that during his lifetime. He shaved his hair. He was a human being just like you and I. He didn't wear a crown on his head and walk around like that. But the people who made statues of him, they didn't live during his lifetime. It was 200 or 300 years after his death that they started making statues of him. But the person who created this artwork, they actually looked at the original teachings because there's a place in the Pali Canon where the Buddha describes what he looks like. And this artist took that description and he depicted him in this way. And this is how I know that the Buddha looked during his lifetime. And I use this in all the different places that I share because I like to humanize a Buddha. I think it's important for you to see the Buddha as just like you and I, like a human being. Because if we put the Buddha up really high on a pedestal and think that he's so great and so wonderful, even though he was really great and wonderful, if we put him up on a pedestal, then you might think that, he can get to enlightenment, but I can't. But I would like you to be able to see that you can get to enlightenment just like the Buddha. And he was a human being just like you and I. So what I have for you is I have a picture of this, the same one that's in the back of the room, but it's a smaller version that if you would like it, you're welcome to have it. And maybe you can post it up somewhere in your house or in your room or something like this, and maybe it'll remind you to meditate. Or maybe you're on the phone with your mom and you're getting angry and you're getting ready to use some wrong speech, and you see that picture and it'll remind you, let me calm down. Let me be respectful and kind with my mom. At the very least, it's going to help you to humanize a Buddha and understand that. So if you'd like to have one of these, I have them over here. They're rolled up. They just happen to look like a diploma, so you might consider it like that at the end of the class like this. And if you'd like to take one and keep it for yourself, you're more than welcome to do that. If you'd like to give it away, that's fine too, because I have no expectation of what you will or will not do with this. Maybe you give it to the person at your hotel, like a housekeeper or the front desk, or maybe there's a restaurant that's been particularly helpful to you while you've been here in Thailand, that maybe you would like to give it to those people too. So you're welcome to take them. They're up here. So as we break for lunch, feel free to come and get one. And I'd just like to let you know this is a gift from me to you. Okay. So what we're going to do is it's 15 minutes after 12. So let's take an hour and a half lunch break, which will get us back here at 1:45, give you guys plenty of time to rest. And then we'll pick it up with helping you to understand how to integrate the teachings into your day-to-day life. And then I'm going to teach you about this activity that we're going to be doing this afternoon. And then we'll talk about the field trip and all this other kind of stuff too. So thank you guys again. And perhaps I'll see you guys after lunch. Okay.